Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Comic Boom Comic Source collaboration. Time for DC Spotlight for the week of March 12th, 2024. I thought this week was really quite solid. I think there was only one book that I felt was below average, but otherwise, a very enjoyable week. What do you think overall, Rocky?
Yeah, overall, I had a good time this week. I was actually impressed. I enjoyed reading. Well, except for one, all of them I thought were pretty decent. I got frustrated with two, but one really frustrated, and I'm sure you'll guess which one it is. But for the most part, I enjoyed this week. It was definitely in the high 80% range for likability for me.
Yeah, I have a feeling it's probably the same one that we've been disappointed throughout, but let's get started. We'll find out if we're on the same page. So, kick it off with Batman and Robin and Howard. Batman and Robin and Howard. Part one,
Yeah.
written and drawn by Jeffrey Brown, colors by Silvana Breese. This one's a little bit interesting. So, this is actually from DC's young adult graphic novel line, and this has been released before, released in its entirety before, as kind of a standalone graphic novel. It's definitely for younger readers. They've decided, I think, because there's a sequel to this coming out later this year. I got a chance to talk with Jeffrey Brown. They announced it at Comic-Con last year, San Diego Comic-Con, that they were going to do a sequel to this called Batman and Robin and Howard Summer Breakout. So that, like I said, that's coming later this year. And I think based on the popularity and the success of the first one, this one here, they're releasing it in a serialized form rather than just the graphic novel, which you can still go out and buy the graphic novel, but now they're releasing it in traditional comic book form. They divide it up into four parts, and they're going to be releasing single issues. And then, like I said, Summer Breakout coming later this year. So it's kind of a younger, more innocent Batman and Robin here. Basically, Damian is going to a public school for the first time, and he meets this kid, Howard, who's sort of, I don't know, every parent's dream when it comes to a kid. He's really smart. He follows all the rules. He's very friendly. And, Damien shows up, and immediately they sort of become rivals because they're both, very intelligent and very skilled at playing soccer and various other things. So it's fun. It's interesting. I would say if you have a, young reader who's interested in comics, somewhere between 8 and 10 years old, might be right up their alley. For older readers, it may be a little on the simple side. That's not to say there's not any enjoyment to be had here. I mean, I'm not 10 years old by any stretch of the imagination. Kind of wish I was, to be honest. But anyway, I got enjoyment out of this. I never read the original graphic novel when it came out, so happy to read it in the serialized form, and really enjoyed it. The art kind of similar, it's very kind of innocent, cartoon looking, Sunday morning funnies, if you will, kind of style. So yeah, overall, solid comic. I mean, it won awards. It was a bestseller, and you can see why when you check this out. Any thoughts on it, Rocky?
No, I apologize. I did not read this. I thought I had assumed that we weren't going to be reviewing it, to be honest, because it was for an all ages fiction. But so I apologize for that. But it definitely it looks good. I mean, I enjoy the art. I actually have a huge collection of DC animated prints, and I actually have the first seven or eight young adult DC compilations. So I might even end up acquiring this at some point in the future. I usually wait till I get them on sale. So and I'll probably read them at that time. But I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was. It's again really funny. Not to spoil too much, but yeah, there's a scene where Batman and Robin, right at the beginning, Batman and Robin are out on patrol. They're on a rooftop. And they see these people trying to uh, use like a coat hanger to get into a car. Robin assumes they're trying to steal the car. He jumps down on a car across the street, puts a dent in the hood of that car. Come to find out, these people have it's their car. They've locked their keys in there. They're trying to get into it, and Batman scolded him. You should have known by context and what have you. And you put a dent in this other car. It's coming out of your allowance, that sort of thing. So yeah, there's a scene. If you're watching this on YouTube, you could see the little dent there. So yeah, it's very humorous, and again, certainly aimed at young readers. All right, Moving on, next up we have Fables number 162. This may be the last Fables that we see for a while. I would say it's safe to say this is the last Fables we'll ever see printed from DC after all the fallout that came to light between Bill Willingham, the writer and creator, and DC Comics. The penciler, as it has been throughout Fables' run, is Mark Buckingham. Steve Aloha does the inks, Lee Luffridge on colors, Todd Klein on letters. So I've never read Fables. I always leave this one to Rocky to review. But if this is the series finale, if this is the final Fables we get, did it end in a satisfying way?
Well, it does feel like it ended in a little bit of a rushed fashion, but it actually didn't. Bill Willingham, even before the controversy regarding the intellectual property rights of Fables, he had finished writing it a couple 2 or 3 years ago, even if I understand correctly, and it still feels a little bit rushed to me, but it was still kind of cool. It was nice to see a battle between the Green of the Forest versus Peter Pan, who's protected by Tinkerbell. Tinkerbell hates protecting Peter Pan, but she's forced to. Last issue leading up to this, the big bad wolf, Bigby, was essentially disemboweled by Peter Pan and Tinkerbell, who was forced to aid Peter Pan, whether she likes it or not, because of past magics used against her. And one of the cubs, one of the wolf cubs of the big bad wolf and Snow White, Dare is his name. He was actually killed, and so there was some tragedy here. But there's a lot of good moments. Tinkerbell gets her come up. Tinkerbell ends up rather than being the Green of the Forest, rather than shooting her arrow, which has a lot of magics against Peter Pan, she ends up shooting it and releasing Tinkerbell from her spell, and so Tinkerbell then can enact her revenge on Peter Pan. Meanwhile, Cinderella, who's infiltrating the politics of the Mundy world, or man's world, basically, she actually encourages Pinocchio to run as a politician because he's the perfect politician, because every time he lies, his nose grows, so everybody will know when he's being honest. And can you imagine that, an honest politician? So Pinocchio really is, if only all politicians' noses grew if they were Pinocchio, they'd all have to lie. So there's some. It sounds silly, but in the context of the story and what the Mundys need to accomplish to sort of fit into fit into the Mundy world, as they call it, it all makes sense. And there's a lot of things that are set up. Snow White's pregnant again, this time not with cubs, but she's calling them pups. And so there's rebirth, and there's plenty of fodder for future Fable stories. This one did feel a little bit rushed on the ending, but frankly, I guess for most of us who like Fables, we're going to have to be satisfied with this, because it might be quite a while, if ever, that we'll ever see a Fables stories again. But I hope we do, and I hope that whatever is going on with Bill Willingham and the intellectual property rights on this, I hope it works out in the favor of whoever can do more Fables stories. But and kudos to Buckingham on the art. Mark Buckingham is classic. He got all the same creative team together on this, and the covers A and the variant covers were very good as well. This is particularly one of the better covers, I think, of the series, with Snow White on the cover. And so part 12 of 12, the final chapter of the Black Forest saga. I thought it ended reasonably well, but a little rushed.
Fair enough. All right. Well, speaking of Batman and Robin, but this time without Howard, we have issue number 7 of their series, written by Joshua Williamson. Simone DeMeo handles the art. Giovanna Nero on colors. Steve Wan's doing the letters. This is interesting, right? In a way, on one end, you've got that Batman and Robin and Howard story, like as innocent as it can possibly be. Maybe on the other extreme, you've got something Black Label. But if you move a little bit closer to center, you're going to have kind of what Zdarsky doing in the regular Batman title, which is pretty dark, and obviously themes of the Joker and what have you, and Dr. Capteo, as we mentioned, being a prisoner for possibly years, just a really, really dark theme. This is not that with what Williamson is doing. Don't get me wrong, there's still a little bit of a horror vibe to it, but this is much closer in sensibility to Batman and Robin and Howard, I would say, than it is to Zdarsky's run. And that's all based on the fact that Williamson is really focusing in on the relationship between Bruce Wayne and Damian Wayne. And even though he in this particular issue, Joshua Williamson is bringing back Flatline from his Robin run that he did with Gleb Melnikoff, and later Roger Cruz was on art. Um, like I said, this is really focused on the relationship between Damian and Bruce. And when Flatline shows up, and she kind of mentions to Damian, they were kind of boyfriend and girlfriend for a little while, and she mentions to Damian, she's like, I thought you were on the outs with your father. And Damian says, hey, things have been a lot better since I've been back. We've really been trying to work on it and what have you. And there's a little bit of a montage piece that shows Bruce and Damian spending time together. So, and I don't mind this at all, but what I will say is it does feel a little weird. Maybe isolated is a better term for it, right? Because that sensibility, that relationship between Damian and Bruce, we only get that relationship presented in this way in this book. Now, Damian's not showing up a lot elsewhere, so it's kind of okay. It does sort of work, but it is very strange to see, I don't want to say a happier Bruce, but I don't know what the right term is, but a Bruce that's less filled with angst, right? Like you read that Zdarsky run and everything is life or death, and there's a lot of just grin and bear it type feel. Like it's not a good time to be Bruce Wayne if you're the Bruce Wayne in the Zdarsky book. But if you're the Bruce Wayne here in this Batman and Robin book, hey, life's not so bad, right? You're still out on a patrol. You're still trying to take down and investigate this cult that Man-Bat has apparently created. And there's a lot of twists and turns and what have you. But yeah, life's just better if you're Bruce Wayne, if you're living in this Batman and Robin book as opposed to being over in the Batman book. As far as the rest of the story, that cult of Man-Bat, the character of Shush, it hasn't really been explained too well. Apparently, just from some clues of context and what those two characters have been saying, how they've been interacting with each other, it's clear that they made some sort of deal at one point for Shush to want to be in charge of the kind of the criminal underworld of Gotham City, and her thinking that Man-Bat was a way to help do that. But Man-Bat apparently has betrayed her in some way. He's not doing what she wants him to do. So she turns around and now she's trying to team up with Batman. So kind of interesting. I'm sure that in Williamson's mind, this is, smart storytelling and, big twist and, we're supposed to be so shocked by this. I got to be honest, it feels a little clunky. And I think partly because we don't really understand why they were teamed up in the first place, what exactly they were doing. There's just some pieces of the puzzle that are missing. And so I find it a little hard to care or to be surprised that Shush is flipping, allegiances like this so quickly. So I don't know. We'll see how that all plays out. If it ends up paying off in a satisfactory way, remains to be seen. But I did, again, enjoy the Bruce and Damian moments. And I'm also really enjoying the Flatline Damian moments. I like that relationship. I like the dynamic between the two. I liked it in the Robin series. I'm glad that Williamson brought her in here. I think she keeps Damian on her toes. She's not kind of wowed by him like other characters have been in the past, but he's also not a dick to her the way he is to like I go back to that Titans run, right, where he was in charge and there was some antagonism between him and his teammates, but he just came across as so unlikable sometimes. The Damian here in his interaction with the Flatline is very likable. As far as the art goes, I mean, this is so interesting. I was thinking about this earlier today, knowing we were going to review this. I think Simone DeMeo is a fantastic artist. And I would go to like a gallery showing, an exhibit of his art and look at it, hanging on the walls and be blown away by the color and the composition and what have you. But when it comes to that art needing to tell a story sequentially, I think I'm not a fan of it. I don't know why, but I seem to have enjoyed the issues of Batman and Robin that he hasn't drawn, that he hasn't illustrated, more than the ones that he has. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's his choices in color or what have you. It's not hard to follow The story, visually, from Simone in this issue, but I don't think it's as clean as other artists have done. And I just don't care for the color palette he uses. I've talked about it before. A lot of pinks and blues and purples, and I don't know. It just doesn't work for me. So it's so strange. I think like I'm a fan of his when it comes to, I think like covers um, and certain sort of splash pages, but for panel to panel, yeah, I don't think his art style's for me. I don't know. It's really strange. It's really strange. I think he's super talented. I don't know. The art in this one just didn't do it for me. And I find myself saying that a lot on these Simone DeMeo issues. So again, it's all subjective. Um, there's nothing technically wrong with the art. It's just not my cup of tea, I guess. So anyway, what are your thoughts on this issue, Rock?
I actually, generally speaking, agree with your comments on the art. I'm not a huge fan of the Simon DeMeo covers. Although, fortunately for myself, I find his interior action scenes a little bit more, tolerable, and it's not that it's bad or anything, but it's just I agree with you that the color palette just does seem to be a little bit off. It's everything's sort of blurred, and I just like the lines a little bit more clear, and the background's more clear, and the colors I want them to pop off the page a little bit more. But having said that, the 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 style of the art aside, I'm still actually enjoying this, and I want to give Williamson some props because I'm not afraid to criticize Williamson at the best of times, but I've been loving what he's doing on Superman. And his Batman and Robin here, I've really been enjoying. And, finally we see Flatline. And I think those of us who enjoyed his Robin series, and Williamson surprised the hell out of me because I enjoyed his Robin series. And he actually made Damian likable again in his Robin series. And thankfully, Williamson remembered his own characterization of Damian, and Damian remains likable. And of course, Damian might even love Flatline. It certainly has a strong crush on her. And I love that Williamson is actually introducing a plot line that I find more interesting, and I'm willing to bet that most readers of Robin and fans of Damian find more interesting, and that is by bringing Flatline back and also bringing back the fact that she's hallucinating, or not hallucinating, but she actually sees the ghost of Ra's al Ghul, because Ra's al Ghul was dead, and I don't know if it was from the Lazar strain or whatever that storyline was, but she's back in Gotham, but she's lying about why she's back. But she's not completely lying. She is apparently looking for her sister Mila, and Mila also has some powers because we know that Flatline got her powers somehow through her dead her grandfather, and it looks like Flatline has a sister who also has a power set of her own, and we're not really sure what that is, but we get some sort of teases of it, and so it's really kind of interesting. So why exactly is Flatline back in Gotham? I love how Batman reacts to Flatline. Damian blushes. Batman, obviously his dad can see that. What I like about this is, and this is it's such a refreshing take on Batman in a way that Batman is enjoying having. I mean, how many? I have a 10-year-old daughter, but how many how many fathers would love to be able to bond and sometimes struggle bonding with their 13 or 14 or 15-year-old kid? And it doesn't always work out. And this is the ultimate way to bond with your kid. He's crime fighting with you on a daily, and they're actually getting along here. Damian at one point in this story says to Flatline, we get along as we work well as Batman and Robin, but not so much as father and son. And I would almost say that on the contrary, in many ways, they do get along quite well as father and son. In many ways, it does work, but Damian maybe thinks it doesn't. What I love about this is that Damian, through what he believes are struggles in getting to know his dad, and same with Bruce getting to know Damian, they're actually doing it right, because that's what it's all about. It's just spending time together, and that's what we're seeing, and it's developing organically. Meanwhile, they're having these adventures together, and I mean, this is really the first time that father's meeting the girlfriend of his son, but it just happens to be Batman and Robin, and it works, and it works well, and it's Flatline of all people, and I don't know. I just really enjoyed this. This actually feels, even though, as you said, and this is where I'm very forgiving of my while I'm not a huge fan of the art, it works because even though the art conveys sort of a horror element because it deals with Man-Bat as a villain and Shush as a disgruntled villain who wants to betray Man-Bat now and work with Batman, even though there's a horror element to it, God, if it doesn't, it feels more fun and hopeful than horrific, than horror-like. And I like that. It seems to work. Williamson has actually made that to balance. And I have to give some props to the art for that as well, because even though the color palette on the art, I think that in many ways it's interesting how the color palette goes very dark and gloomy, and yet it gets very bright and yellowy in other parts. But I think it's in defense of Simon DeMaio trying to ride that line between the horror elements and the more hopeful, fun aspects of the story. That is, maybe he's trying to reflect that in the color palette. And all I know is that at the end of the day, it works for me, despite some hiccups. And I'm enjoying this series, and I got to give props to the creative team.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Again, that relationship between Flatline and Damien is one to watch. And you mentioned her sister and the whole Ra's al Ghul thing. I get, perhaps this is the path back to life for Ra's al Ghul. I guess we'll have to wait and see. So anyway, up next we have Action Comics number 1063. It's The Mind of Steel, I Bizarro Conclusion, written by Jason Aaron, art by John Timms, colors by Rex Locus, letters by Dave Sharp. I am really curious to hear your thoughts on this particular issue, because I didn't realize, this is only the third issue, but it's already the end, right? Of this particular story. So a little surprised that it ended as quickly as it did. Felt a little abrupt to me, actually, but let's get your thoughts first, and then I'll chime in.
Well, I'm glad I had some time to reflect on this story, because when I initially read it, I got a little bit annoyed. Not in a bad way, just a minor irritation. But then it went away the more I reflected on it. And the reason why, let me say why I got mildly annoyed when I first read it, because I thought it wrapped up too conveniently. Because I was hoping that the sane Joker, the concept of a sane Joker, we have a reality-based world that becomes insane because Bizarro utilizes all the powers of magic, and he flips the world and is slowly converting the world basically through his mind, of which he's trying to overcome Superman's mind, and he's trying to make this sane world insane, or the opposite, the Bizarro. And since everything's flipped, Superman thinks to himself, well, in an insane world run by Bizarro, I got to find the Joker, because the Joker is insane in the real world. So in the insane world, Joker will be sane. And so Joker is the natural guy to go to help me against Bizarro. Now, I'm not entirely sure that makes sense, that logic, necessarily. But I'll go with it, because it's kind of, I wanted to see what the sane Joker would bring to this storyline. Now, on a first read, I'm thinking to myself, what did the sane Joker actually do? Writer Jason Aaron tries to create some kind of relationship between sane Joker and Batman, where Superman has some tacit respect for the sane Joker, and it maybe works a little bit, but for the most part, it didn't really have that much of an impact on me. This wraps up so conveniently, and this is where my irritation initially bore fruit. Is it basically, the advice sane Joker gives Superman is essentially to let Bizarro win. In other words, let the Bizarro mind take control of you, and then in your failure and in your defeat, you're going to be on the same playing field as Bizarro. In other words, the only way to enter Bizarro's mind is that you've got to let Bizarro's mind overwhelm you, and then you'll be on the same playing field as Bizarro. And then once you're in Bizarro's mind, then you'll know how he did all the magics, because you'll be privy to his thoughts, and then you can undo from within all the stuff that Bizarro did. And that's what happens, and Superman wins the day, and when he undoes everything, sane Joker becomes insane again, and the world is saved and everything else. But I thought it was kind of convenient and kind of a cop-out, and I thought to myself, well, you didn't need a sane Joker to tell you that. Couldn't anybody have told him that? What kind of advice is in that? And I feel a little bit, upon reflection, the way I'm reconciling it in my head is, it's such an insane idea to let yourself get defeated. Like in the real world, to if somebody's trying to take control of your mind, to let them take control of your mind. In all other circumstances, if Superman was to let Bizarro take control of his mind, that's a stupid, to let a supervillain completely control get into your head. That's an insane idea. It's insane and stupid. But in a Bizarro world, isn't the most insane, stupid idea, i.e., let the bad guy win? Isn't that the most sane decision? Isn't that the right decision? And maybe if you flip it on its head, ironically, the sane Joker's advice, i.e., let Bizarro's mind take over, so you can defeat him from within his own mind. As insane as that sounds, it's sane in a Bizarro world. So when I thought of it that way, I thought, well, okay, maybe I'll give some props to Jason Aaron. That's the way I'm trying to justify it in my head. I don't know if it's, I still find it to be kind of convenient, a little bit too convenient. The final moments between Superman and the sane Joker were, I never really felt that there was really any much of a true, genuine bond between Superman and Joker. I was hoping for the sane Joker to actually to do something with more that was more impressive, but I never got that. And how the same Joker helped him on this with that advice, I didn't really think that it really worked. I wish it could have worked better, but it wasn't bad. And the fact that it was only 3 issues, I thought it was 4 issues, but I guess you're right, it's only 3 issues. I think it's a nice short story, and it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it makes you think. I thought a lot about Bizarro speak and Bizarro, and the ending makes me think a little bit. And I will say this: I would have, of all the ideas, when I think of some of the bad ideas that DC has had for some of their events, like Night Terrors, for example, even Dark Crisis, which I thought was not good, and I think of some of the events and the ideas for events, I would have preferred to see this Bizarro world be an event over Night Terrors, because there's so many different directions that it could go in cool ways that were not explored. Like, for example, like, what's with all the magic? Bizarro controlling all the magic. And now he killed all those magic wielders. Well, who's going to replace them? I mean, so now the magic's returned is the magic affected by Bizarro? All those people, those magic wielders and sorcerers that he killed, what happened to them? There's so much story potential in this concept. I kind of wish we had got more than 3 issues. And so I want to give props to Jason Aaron for coming up with a good concept. I just wish that more writers and other creative minds, in addition to Jason Aaron, could have maybe contributed to it, because I think it has a lot of potential. But I don't want to kick a gift horse in the mouth. I did enjoy this. I wish the ending would have been a little bit more impressive. I wanted the sane Joker to be more impressive in terms of the advice he gave Superman. But overall, I did find myself entertained, and I think Jason Aaron, for his first Superman story, I think he did a pretty good job, and it didn't take him forever to tell the story. So I do think I'm going to give him some props, and I do recommend the story. So what about yourself?
Yeah, I kind of feel like it ended on a whimper as well. I mean, it's interesting. There's a lot here in only 3 issues, like you mentioned, that Aaron explores when it comes to Superman. He definitely gets it. He gets it when it comes to what makes Superman who he is. There's a reference to Superman battling Bizarro in his own mind, and Superman is killed and defeated over and over. He says, this is the 80th defeat. This is the 90th defeat. Like, in different ways that that Bizarro is torturing Superman. He makes him go and destroy the sun. So he kills, everybody in the solar system, loses his powers because there's no yellow sun. So many different ways to explore Superman, and the fact that he never gives up. And that's fine. But that takes a back seat to Bizarro himself, who's definitely more of a main character than Superman, and the Joker. We didn't get hardly any Joker in the first 2 issues. And I agree with you. I don't know that it totally makes sense if it's a Bizarro world and the Joker's the most insane, then in a backwards or an opposite world of that, he'll be the most sane. Most sane doesn't mean he's going to have any insight into how to defeat Bizarro. and yeah, it is a little sort of cliche the way he does. Joker says, "Well, let him win," and in doing that, it gives so the splinter of Bizarro that has survived the explosion that we see at the beginning of the story that infects the entire world with Bizarro magic, if you will. A little bit of Bizarro is lodged in Superman's mind, and that's how Bizarro is trying to take control over Superman and torture him and what have you. So by letting Bizarro win, by giving up, which it seems like he could have gave up a little sooner and easier, Superman, without being tortured so much. But anyway, by doing that, Superman in turn gets access to Bizarro's mind. So Bizarro, he's fighting it the whole time. He gives in, he gives up in a way, and that gives him access to Bizarro's mind, and then he's able to kind of unravel whatever it is in Bizarro's mind that's able to control magic. So again, some really cool ideas, even though, yeah, a little bit cliched. But again, Superman is almost an afterthought in this story, other than the idea that he never gives up. Well, we already kind of know that. That's nothing new. And Jason Aaron sells it very well with this same Joker, and once Superman apparently is defeated by Bizarro, and only the Joker is left as sort of a sane person in this Bizarro world, and he says, well, why don't you go ahead and end it, Bizarro? Go ahead and kill me. This is the Joker talking, and he goes, before you do, let me tell you. And he starts talking to him about all these horrible and depraved thoughts that he had in his mind, all the horrible and depraved things he did, pre-Bizarro world, before everything was transformed, when he was still insane. And somehow this kind of distracts Bizarro and allows Superman to untangle what he needs to untangle and what have you, and allows Superman and the Joker to eventually win the day. In that moment, when that's happening, Superman's off the table. As far as we know, even as readers, he's been defeated. The Joker is the one that really saves the day. That's how it comes across. We don't know that Superman is working behind the scenes. And as I'm reading that part of the story, I'm thinking to myself, well, Jason Aaron didn't want to tell a Superman story at all. Jason Aaron wanted to tell a Joker story. The argument could be made that Joker is a much bigger hero and has a much bigger role to play in defeating Bizarro than Superman himself does. I'm not going to belabor the point. We all know how I feel about the Joker. But in that moment, I was like, really? I kind of hate this. It's redeemed a little bit in the end because, as we find out, Superman is working behind the scenes or what have you. But it still feels a little bit to me like Jason Aaron wanted to tell a Joker story, but wasn't offered a chance to tell a Joker story. But you can take it either way. It's Action Comics. I expect a Superman story. Superman does show up a lot in this particular issue, so take that for what you will. But there's also another school of thought that I've heard a lot recently, that a really good writer, a really good comic book writer, is going to tell the story they want to tell, regardless of what title and who the main character or what have you. And this isn't new. This goes far, far back. You could say Jim Starlin, even, right? Like, you look at what Jim Starlin did. He got one issue of Iron Man, and he introduced Thanos and was going to tell his cosmic story. And then, if rumors and history are to be believed, Stan Lee hated it, took him off Iron Man after only one issue. They moved him over to Captain Marvel, and he's telling the same story. He's telling the Thanos story, right? So again, what Aaron's doing here is not new, but, and maybe it's just my predilection to dislike the Joker. It wasn't what I was expecting, and I sort of didn't like it. But that being said, I can't argue that it's not an entertaining story. I think the art and the color work is fantastic. It was interesting. I said right from the start, if you remember, Rocky, you really enjoyed the first issue. I was less receptive to it because I also don't care much for Bizarro. I think Superman has a lot of great villains that I enjoy. Obviously, Lex, although he may be, there may be a tendency to overuse him as a Superman villain. Brainiac, who we're going to get, later this year. Parasite, Toyman, Silver Banshee. Ironically enough, a lot of the villains that we've seen, or characters that we've seen, I don't know if you still call Silver Banshee a villain, but a lot of the members of Superman's Rogues Gallery that we've seen over in Joshua Williamson's Superman run, ironically enough. So I think he has a lot of great villains that don't get used enough. Um, Bizarro, I could kind of just leave it, and we all know how I feel about the Joker. Although the Joker as a villain to go up against Superman every once in a while, I do enjoy because it never works out well for the Joker, and much like I say, if the Joker was real, he'd be defeated very quickly. That's typically what happens. Like I think back to my favorite Joker story when they showed up in Superman. I think it was Superman number 9, if I'm not mistaken. It's a classic John Byrne cover where Superman or Joker's on the cover and he's wearing Superman's costume.
Mhm.
And in the story, the Joker had kidnapped, I think it was Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, and Perry White, and he hid them in lead coffins around the city because this is when Superman was first starting out. Like a lot of people, the Joker mistakenly thought that Superman couldn't see lead, not couldn't see through it. So by putting him in lead coffins, it actually
Start out
and the
like a
Joker,
sore thumb. Yeah.
yeah, it stuck out like a sore thumb. And the Joker was like, "Think you can only save. There's only enough air for one of them. You won't be able to find him in time." But it was actually easy for him to find. He just used his X-ray vision, and he's like, "One there, one there, one there."
Yeah.
Uh, and that was a fantastic Joker Superman story. Um,
Yeah.
this, less so.
Yeah.
But again, very technically well done. Just because it wasn't to my taste doesn't mean that it wasn't
Yeah.
done well.
It should also be noted here that it's possible that the Bizarro still is just playing possum, because at the end it does show Bizarro. Superman does mention that Bizarro is speaking in his head, telling him to be Bizarro. It seems to say the image in the mirror is Bizarro. So Bizarro could at any point potentially manifest himself at any point in the future. Because where did Bizarro go? Where did he disappear to? If
Yeah,
it's
we don't know.
does he still have all the magic, but he's just renegated somewhere in the mindscape of Superman slash Bizarro? Don't really know. Also, one final comment is that I always thought Superman was vulnerable to magic. Well, it maybe Superman is vulnerable physically to magic, but in the mindscape, maybe he's less vulnerable to magic when he's in the mind. And because I would still think that a Bizarro is a sorcerer and has all the magic, even if he's in Bizarro's mind, he's still vulnerable to the magic. But that doesn't appear to be the case. Bizarro needs to focus the magic, and the Joker distracting him like that weakened it enough that Superman could gain control of Bizarro's mind. It still seems a little bit wonky, a little bit convenient for me, but I like the idea that Bizarro's playing possum and is just playing his cards, waiting to attack again, because that's the implication on the final page. But we'll have to see.
Yeah, again, it's part of the story that I don't care for. Superman has very good strength of will. It's very hard to mind control Superman, and yet not only is Bizarro, apparently defeated, but yeah, then we're kind of hinted at the end. Well, maybe not. Maybe Bizarro's still in his mind. I just don't. I don't like a lot of the points of the story. But again, that's my personal taste. Um, I think it's technically a well done comic, and I know a lot of people love Bizarro. So for those Bizarro fans, they probably really enjoyed this. All right, let's move on. Up next, we have Green Lantern issue number 9. This is from writer Jeremy Adams. Art is by Zermanico. Colors by Romulo Fajardo Jr. Letters by Dave Sharp. We saw last issue Hal Jordan going to Madame Xanadu to get some hints on where he should be looking to find out how he can leave Earth and why he's stuck there and what have you, so he can go in pursuit of Sinestro. And also the mystery of these various lanterns who seem to be able to change emotional spectrum, which color they're wielding. That mystery is going on as well. So very interesting what what Jeremy Adams does here, because it's almost like a throwback to a little bit of Alan Scott Green Lantern, who, I mean, we think about the modern Green Lantern Corps, it's more science fiction, right? Like there's these giant batteries and harnesses willpower energy, and it feels more on the science end and futuristic and what have you. You go back to the original Green Lantern, Alan Scott, and his ring is powered by the lantern, which is um, powered by the Starheart, which was supposedly this meteor that fell to Earth or what have you. But there was a lot more kind of supernatural and magic overtones to the Alan Scott Green Lantern, if you will. It's almost like Jeremy Adams is marrying the two together, right? Because in this particular issue, what ends up happening is Green Lantern discovers this, for lack of a better term, world beneath the surface, um, and there is a green battery held there, and we find out it's sort of the backup battery, like the Owens, the Guardians of the Universe,
The
decided that
fail-safe battery. Fail-safe battery.
yeah, decided that they wanted a backup battery somewhere in case something ever happened to the battery on Oa, which has been blowing up a lot lately. It happened in Jeremy Thorne's run, and I mean, it feels like it happens every 2 or 3 years. But anyway, they said that the willpower of humans is, particularly strong, and so if there's anywhere to put a failsafe battery, it's going to be on Earth. So it's in proximity to some of the greatest ring slingers that in the universe. Um, and so, being that it's in this sort of underground oasis, if you will, um, and we also have an appearance by Tom Kalmaku, who long time supporting classic Green Lantern character. I don't know the last time we saw him, but he was the one that was there guarding it. He had a vision from the Guardians that he was supposed to go and guard this thing, and he's been waiting for Hal Jordan to show up. And there's a reference to Millennium, which was a very interesting, let's say, crossover event way back in the late 80s, coming out. I think it was Legends, and then so Christ on Different Earth, and then Legends was the next big event, and then Millennium. Um, and Tom Kalmaku, he was one of the Guardians last, we're told now. So anyway, it does feel like when Hal gets his ring, because there are actual rings there, not just one that he created, that this failsafe battery is somehow tied into the green a little bit. There's a lot of nature and a little bit of magic overtones in this. And when Hal goes to charge his ring on the battery, it disappears. He's like, wait, what's my ring? And Tom goes, hey, we got some real rings here, not one that you just created. And so Hal puts two and two together. Okay, the reason he was able to create the ring was his proximity to this battery, and now he's got a real ring. And there's other rings there for the other members of 2814, the sector that Earth is in, that tie to this battery that they'll be able to charge it. So once Hal gets a real Green Lantern ring and charges it up, he is able to leave Earth. So obviously the reason he wasn't able to leave before is because if he would have got too far away from that failsafe battery, his ring would have disappeared and he would have died in space. So it makes sense why he couldn't leave Earth. And once Hal does get the ring and he is able to leave Earth, he goes to Oa to try to figure out what's going on. And he runs into a lot of those lanterns that we saw before that are able to channel different energies from the emotional spectrum. So it seems like there's something going on Oa, some sort of power struggle between the United Planets, these ring wielders who are able to channel different emotional spectrums, and there must be some sort of rebellion going on as well, apparently led by Joe Mullen, because she shows up at the end. We're told next we're going to see Sojourner and the Rebels. So I've talked before about my dislike for using the United Planets as a sort of the villain of this piece, the bureaucracy of it, the fascism of it. We'll get into the backup story here in a little bit. But I thought this was really enjoyable. It's Adams doing what he does best, taking classic things that as Green Lantern fans, as longtime DC Comics fans that we love, like Millennium, like the emotion or the green, from Swamp Thing, like Tom Kalmaku, like the New Guardians, taking those concepts, bringing them into modern stories in a way that makes sense, but giving us something that also feels fresh and exciting. And the Zermanico art is fantastic. He's got some great splash pages. He's got some great layouts. For me, there's nothing not to like, other than, and I'm nitpicking, the choice of the United Planets as the villain of the piece, if you will. But I don't necessarily think that's something Jeremy, did. That was established by Bendis back in the day, and it's sort of been the status quo for a while. I'm ready for it to go. I got to tell you, like, the United Planets has leave the United Planets in the future with the Legion of Superheroes, and just let me have a non-United Planet cosmic story in modern times. But anyway, what do you think of the main story here?
I liked it. I liked it, and I also like the United Planets. And I think that if you had your way, uh, General Zod would take care of the United Planets, and then you wouldn't have to worry about the United Planets anymore, and that might
Yeah.
happen. Who knows? So that's another discussion. But the character Tom Kamaku, the last time I saw him, well, I should say the last memorable story I saw him in was, and I'm really dating myself, but back in the time when Hal Jordan was killed, and when he became Parallax, and he was supposedly, when there was a time when we thought Hal Jordan was dead and he had become corrupted. There was a hardcover a DC hardcover called "The Last Will and Testament of Hal Jordan." And in that story, it's just an amazing story. I can't remember the writer, but in that story, it was in the last will. It was the last will of Hal Jordan that Tom Kamaku take over and become a Green Lantern because of how much respect he had for his friend, because Tom was his heart and soul. And seeing that Jeremy Adams using him here, and it's not even clear if this Tom character is actually from our universe, but from another one. But the fact that he was the one chosen to protect this fail-safe lantern inside this mountaintop in Spain, protected by the Green, it really tugged at my memories of the character, and just how perfect it is for him to be there. The reference to Millennium, I'm not a fan. I don't think many people are big fans of the Millennium series or the New Guardians. Millennium I think is a series that's most known. Isn't it the first appearance of the Suicide Squad, or in issue 4 or something of that?
That's Legends.
Or Legends, right? No, so Millennium. What happened to Millennium? Wasn't there a cocaine sniffing villain, or?
Extrano.
Oh
Extrano,
yeah.
the first openly
Oh,
gay DC
right.
character.
Yeah,
That's
right.
that's kind
Yeah,
of Millennium's claim to fame. Take that for what you will. I don't know.
yeah. No, it was. So that was. Yeah, it's probably good he's the last of the New Guardians, but at least he's probably the best of the New Guardians, because they didn't have a particularly memorable roster by any stretch. With apologies to Extrano, who's actually, in fairness, there's a couple of Pride anthologies that we reviewed where he's become more interesting in the last 5 years, Extrano, than he ever did in that appearance. But in any event, I thought this worked quite well, and it was the fact that we have these. It's going to add new mythology now. Now, the fact that we have a fail-safe Green Lantern battery on Earth, that's kind of a dangerous thing for Earth, because we know wherever there's a central power battery, like you said there, it always seems to explode or what have you. In terms of continuity, it's a little wonky, but I don't care. Jeremy Adams is playing with it a bit. Who cares? I wonder where this central power battery was during Jeffrey Thorne's run. There has been many emergencies when the main central battery was destroyed. How come this central battery has not manifested itself until now? It had plenty of opportunities and many emergencies in the past from which to say, hey, maybe spring up now, since the main power battery was dead. And so it seems a little bit odd to me. I would have almost thought there was another offshoot, or a rebellious group of Guardians maybe put this together. Also, they never actually said, I thought it was very interesting what Adams did. He never actually said that people of Earth have particularly strong inclinations to be good at willpower. What was said was that humans have an innate inability to follow orders and they have a will to survive. So that's not necessarily a compliment, but it just goes to show that when the universe is in trouble and you need rebels, you might as well have a lantern on the most rebellious planet of all, consisting of people who have an inability to follow orders and do what they're told. That's definitely Earth. But in any event, I really like this main story, and in particular how it ends with with Hal Jordan meeting up with Joe Mullein on Oa, and that's flowing into the backup, which I love. I love the backup as much as I love the main story. But you can talk about that.
Yeah, let's talk about the backup, written by Sam Humphries, who's known for writing Jessica Cruz. The backup is titled The Trial of Jessica Cruz. Yasmin Flores Montanez is the artist. Alex Guermas on colors. Letters by Dave Sharp, I should say. And basically, Jessica is one of the few Earth Lanterns who chose to stay. We know Guy Gardner and Jon Stewart and Hal Jordan all came back to Earth. She stayed. She's working for the United Planets. She goes with another lantern, and they're supposed to be blowing up the power battery on whatever the home planet is of Yarfleet, so blowing up the
Yeah.
orange battery, and um, when the bomb is set, Jessica contains the blast at the last minute and prevents the explosion, and so they think that she has betrayed them. The United Planets says, "Hey, you went against orders," and she covers it pretty well. She says actually she blames it on the lantern that she was teamed up with, Lantern Endicott, and she says no, she set the bomb incorrectly, and if I had let it go off in the way that it was going to, it would have spewed orange energy, all over the universe, and that's the last thing that we would have wanted. So the battery in the end was ultimately destroyed. Larfeez was captured. So I actually did what I was supposed to be doing. And as all this is happening, and we find out later why it goes down this way. As all this is happening, there is an attempt on the life of the leader of the United Planets, and this guy, man, is he a jerk? Like an absolute, an absolute total jerk, and has been in every comic he's shown up in. This leader of the
Lord Theros. Lord
yeah,
Theros.
yeah, Lord Theros, Lord Premier Theros.
Yes.
Guy's just an absolute a-hole. Like there's no other way to put it. But there's an attempt on his life, and Jessica Cruz is very instrumental in protecting him. And so basically that's kind of how she becomes a member of his elite guard. But then at the end, she calls, who did we just see on the last page of the regular story? She calls Joe Mullen, the leader of the resistance. So this was all staged. The attempt on the life and her being there to protect Lord Premier Theros and earn his trust or whatever. She's now on the inside. She's the mole. She's going to be helping the rebellion, hopefully defeat the United Planets ultimately. So I thought it was fantastic. Love seeing Jessica Cruz. Montanez, we've seen her art before. I feel like her art is a little on the simplistic side for this type of story, especially cosmic Green Lantern stuff, but I can't fault her storytelling. But the other part of it is Zermanico's art is so perfectly suited to tell these kind of big bombastic stories with all the action, what have you. It almost makes Montanez's art look lesser in a lot of ways if you make that comparison. Because I think Montanez, she's a talented artist. If you put her on something like, I keep thinking her art would be perfectly suited for the young Diana stories that we've seen before. Those stories about Wonder Woman when she was little. Perfect art style for that. So it's not to say the art's bad. It just, in comparison to the Zermanico art, it's just such a different style. It's a little bit jarring. So anyway, what do you think of this Jessica Cruz backup?
I thought it blended in well, perfectly with the main story, because we know that Joe Mullen is working behind the scenes on Oa. We know Hal Jordan has finally made it there, and the funny thing is the way that Jeremy Adams has structured this story, in conjunction with the backups, we actually can fill in a lot of the backstory ourselves. We don't need a huge backstory for what happened with Jessica Cruz. We already know. We've just been told she's been working behind the scenes and doing it brilliantly. We know Joe Mullen. She's always been one of those characters that has always been a kick-ass soldier, and she's been working behind the scenes too on Oa. And the way Joe Mullen showed up with that Green Lantern tank, I mean, it was awesome. And all of this, all the players here, and now we're on 9 issues in, and when you consider the fact that 9 issues in, and 2 of the issues had to be wasted on Night Terrors, so really Jeremy Adams only had 7 issues to move all the characters into play here. We got Hal Jordan, Joe Mullen, and Jessica Cruz all already on Oa, and we know that all the power batteries are being destroyed in the universe. We now have a fail-safe backup battery on Earth that the United Planets doesn't know about, or maybe they suspect something. Maybe that's why they quarantined Earth, because they knew about the battery, or they thought they did, or who knows? But there's so many cool moving parts, and I'm asking all these questions, and I don't know the answer to, but I know that Jeremy Adams has thought about it, because I'm getting hints in this story that he knows where this story is going, and I'm excited because I have confidence in the writing. And I actually liked the art. I thought the artistic shift between the backup and the main story, I thought it worked well. We're talking about different parts of the universe. The Examanical's art is fantastic. Because Hal Jordan, he looks like he's a pilot. It just looks epic. It looks Top Gun-ish, how it should look. And Jessica Cruz is a kick-ass character. She's got probably one of the most cool backstories. She's got a story where she's grounded in fear, and she's, in a way, her hero's journey is the most heroic out of all the Lanterns, considering the fear and the trauma that she had to overcome, and to find her to be the escape, to be the mole that may ultimately bring down the United Planets, I just think is so appropriate. I'm having a lot of fun with this. This embodies what I want in the DC universe. You and I have stopped sounding like broken records talking about hope and all that for the DC universe. But I mean, I have a lot of fun with this. And for those people that maybe think, I think this is one of the reasons why this title, Green Lantern, is one of the reasons why that DC is, if you read this, you know that DC is firing on all cylinders for this character. And I gotta tell you that reading this title, I'm actually feeling glad. I actually feel more excited as I was at the top when Jeremy Adams was at the top of his game on Flash. I think he's at a slightly higher game on Green Lantern, to be honest, if I'm brutally honest. So that's a high compliment to Jeremy Adams because I loved his Flash run, but I'm loving his Green Lantern a little bit more. So I mean, what a great problem to have. Now, if only he was writing both, with apologies to Cy Spurrier.
I mean, here's the thing, right? Like, I think when you talk about his Flash run, I don't want to say that it wasn't work, but I feel like it was easier for Jeremy. It came more naturally, right? Like, he's such a huge fan of Wally West. He probably had those stories in his head for years and had more stories to tell if he could have stayed on Flash. And like Rocky said, we wish he had. I think this is a little tougher for him. He's probably got to reach a little deeper, put in a little more thought into the story. So yeah, in that way, I agree. The fact that he's still succeeding at a high level is a tremendous kind of accomplishment. Really, it speaks volumes to his level of talent. And as far as the back, going from the main story to the backup seamlessly, yeah, you're right, 100%. And the fact that we have to comment on that just goes to show how bad the backups have been in terms of tying in with the main story. Oftentimes having nothing to do with the main story, feeling superfluous, feeling like, why am I paying an extra $1 to get this backup that doesn't have anything to do with the main story, or is super convoluted and esoteric, or that we simply don't care about. That's not the case here. So very, very good use of a backup. All right. I'm throwing you under the bus, Rocky. Speed Force number 5 is up next. This is from writer Jarrett Williams. Art is by Daniela Di Niculo and George Kambadas. Colors by Andrew Dahlhaus and Pete Pantazis. And letters by Simon Boland. And I'm throwing you under the bus by making you go first. Give us your thoughts on this one.
Well, I don't really have much to say. What I've done, and this is the 5th issue of Speed Force. It's 6 issues long. It's the 5th issue. The penultimate issue, and unlike the previous issues I actually read 2 to 3 times to try to get a handle on it. And I'm sure anybody who was polite enough to listen to my attempt at reviews in those previous issues probably still didn't understand what I was attempting to say, and maybe I wasn't either. I only read this one once, and I just refused to read it again. I'd be lying if I said I knew exactly. I'm still really at a loss here. I can recite from a little bit of memory that I have left of the previous issues in terms of what's going on here. I mean, there's basically a concert that's been put on, and this music meister's putting it on. It involves an app called Symphony that is manipulating people or mind controlling them, I believe. Booster Gold's putting it on, and somehow the group of bad guys with an agenda of which I'm not entirely clear kidnapped a bunch of scientists that are missing. Somewhere along this way over the last few issues, Blue Beetle and Wallace West thought it was important to get a haircut instead of doing their jobs. And they had a lot of conversations and dialogue. There's all kinds of pop culture references that I don't get, probably because of my age. I say that trying to be self-deprecating, and in fairness to the writer, who I'm sure is more than a few decades younger than I am, and but I just don't. I'll just say I don't get it. I had to laugh out loud in my frustration of trying to understand this story. There was a scene where one of the characters, I forget if he's the music meister, I think he is, he actually sees Madame Xanadu and he steals some of Madame Xanadu's hair. And it's actually stated that he thinks that if you steal Madame Xanadu's hair, that his app needs a magical enhancement. And he says that hair is known to channel energies. And okay, but I mean, I just thought, really, I mean, this is where this story now has come to now, where in the past, this magic music meister has stole the hair from Madame Xanadu, and he somehow put some hair follicles into his app, which somehow maybe made the symphony app manipulate and control people. And I just thought it was kind of comical. And I don't understand what's happening when he's converting some of his minions into these electronic speedmen. I find it odd that I'm going to sound like I'm going to sound like Mr. Magoo here, but even the name of this series, Speed Force, at one point, Avery says that she thinks that that's the name of their new team now, is Speed Force. That's the name of their team. I think it's a terrible name for a team. It might sound like Speed Force, but Speed Force is the name of the energy field that you channel into. That's the Speed Force. Don't call yourselves the Speed Force. I don't like the title. I don't like the concept as a team name. It just doesn't work for me. But unfortunately, this is probably not the first time Speed Force. It's not the first time Speed Force is used as a title to a series anyway. We've gotten a couple of one-shots that were called Speed Force, but it was more of a reference to in my view, the actual energy that speedsters, those conduits, access. But in any event, this just wasn't, this just wasn't my cup of tea. And I really don't know exactly what's going on. I wish I knew, but I will say this as I want to give, to try to give some compliments here. I think that the artist here, and I'm trying to find who the artist is, the writer, Jarrett Williams, the artist is Danielle De Nicole and George Combatis. Yep. They are very good. They are capable of putting a lot of energy and a lot of movement on a page. I think that maybe some of it, I do have a hard time figuring out exactly what's going on sometimes, but it's clear that they put a lot of effort onto the page. The backgrounds are there, the characters are there. I just find that often the dialogue sort of like takes away from their art. At the same time, sometimes the art is a little bit wonky. I'm not clear exactly what's going on. I have to be told. I have to read the dialogue to know exactly what happened on the panel. And I think part of that is because you're dealing with speedsters and because they're moving so fast. It's sort of like even Cy Spurrier has that problem with even with the great artist of Mike Deodato Jr. How do you draw some of these concepts, right? So I want to give some props to the art here because there are some my favorite pages are the ones where it's just the characters talking and there's nothing in the background because it just feels more clear to me. I actually look forward to the pages where it feels that there's less going on, where they're actually standing still, because it's always frustrating to me when I read a Flash comic. Why are you always running? Like, I know it's a Flash comic, but why don't you just stand still and talk? Like, if you got nowhere to run to and you're having a conversation, like, is that a natural state for a speedster to be running around? I like when they're actually just standing around and talking, and there still isn't a scene in this comic, unfortunately, that it would so benefit from it, where, there was ample opportunity. There's literally an opportunity. Mr. Terrific, Connor, Avery, Wallace West, and what's the bouncing kid's name? Roundhouse or whatever. Yeah. They're all together in the room. I would have loved if one of them just did a recap as to what is going on. Like, just do a roundhouse, just do a roundhouse, do a roundup. what's happening, what's going on. I would have really have liked that because it's not clear to me, and I wish this was written more for dummies like me because I'm still not clear exactly what's going on. And a concert's about to begin, and Wallace is saying at the end that, Speed, don't fail me now. It's time to shut this party down. I'm still not sure. Why do you need to shut down the party? I guess, is the app going to do something bad? I'm still not clear what the app's going to do. I'm still not sure where the scientists are. So I'm still at a loss. And it's going to be one of those comic book stories where when we get to the end, somebody in the last 2 pages is going to actually say what happened. And then I'm going to say to myself, oh, that's what happened. And I hate stories like that because it just tells me that it wasn't clear enough getting there. But I'll fall on my sword, and maybe it's just my lack of understanding. But that's again, the kudos to some of the artistic efforts in this series so far. But I think the story for me leaves much to be desired. What about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could disagree with you, but other than to say in broad strokes, yeah, there's something wrong with the Speed Force, and I don't know what's going on, and apparently it has to do with this app, Symphone or Symphon or whatever, some sort of music app. And I'm not clear. Is it brainwashing people? Is it I don't even know. I don't even know. It's so hard to follow this. And it's not that the art is bad. It's just, if I'm glad you mentioned the Salisbury or Diodato flash run, because it's very similar, right? If you have a complicated story, give me art that's a little more clear and simplistic so I can understand. One of them, I got to be able to follow the narrative on one of them. And instead, we have art that's big and bombastic and dynamic and whatever, and it's great just to look at. But then the story is so convoluted and esoteric, I can't understand what's going on. Like, they're both too complicated, much as you said, like the Diodato Spurrier flash run. But I want to like this, and I will disagree with you on one point. I don't think Speed Force is a bad name for a team. Just kind of like the United States established Space Force not too long ago. Which apparently, when we're out there needing to police space, that's what's going to be called. So you get it, right? Like, they're speedsters and they're a force and it's Speed Force. But I do agree with you. It is a bad choice and doesn't work because DC has chosen to call whatever that world or energy or power or whatever that speedsters draw their abilities from, they've chosen to call that the Speed Force. You can't have both. You can't. It's too confusing. So for that reason, I do agree with you. It's a bad choice for the name, but I want to like this. Certainly seeing Avery, the Flash of China, and the dynamic between her and Wallace is very good. Roundhouse, I could kind of take or leave. I love Mr. Terrific, so it's great to see him, even though his characterization is different here than I've ever seen him before. He doesn't come across as one of the smartest guys in the DCU by any stretch of the imagination. So, there's potential here, but unfortunately, it's too convoluted. It's too confusing. The art is the wrong style. And maybe it's like you said, maybe we're just too old to understand this. I don't understand the vernacular. A lot of the vocabulary comes across as kind of wonky to me. But I don't know. Maybe kids really talk like this these days. I mean, none of the kids that my daughter hangs out with. She's 12. So, I have coworkers that are in their early 20s, but I don't know. Do maybe 14, 15, 16-year-olds, maybe this is how they talk. I don't know. Maybe they care about getting haircuts to the point where it can,
Yeah.
with,
Right.
fantastical abilities. It's just, at the end of the day, suffice it to say, this just isn't for me. It's just not. And that's okay. That's okay. All right, let's move on. Up next, we have Sinister Sons #2 from writer Peter J. Tomasi. We have Vasco Gregev and David Lafuente as artists, Tamara Bonvillain on colors, with Rob Lee on letters. We had the first meeting of the Son of General Zod and the Son of Sinestro last issue, the supposed Son of Sinestro, I should say. And now that they've had a chance to meet, things completely go off the rails, and this issue was a lot of fun. What are your thoughts on it?
It was a lot of fun. And I have more fun. It's called Bad Suns Rising. So I love the title. And it is, these are definitely two Bad Suns Rising. And these are two characters where we know that they're both jerks. We know that They're both villains in their own right. We know, quite frankly, we know Lor-Zod is. I will say this: I've always thought of Lor-Zod as being more as older than how he's been de-aged in order to make this work in my mind. Because there's iterations of Lor-Zod in the DC universe, and over the last 5 years where he's definitely older. But the bottom line is, leaving all that aside, and maybe some minor continuity issues, this is a lot of fun. This is a lot of fun. I'll be honest, I actually found this to be more enjoyable than most of the Super Sons adventures I read, because this is just they're genuinely jerks to each other. And I will say that potentially I almost expected Lor-Zod to try to use more lethal force against Sin-Sun, and Sin-Sun against Lor-Zod. Both of them I thought seemed to hold back a little bit. I was surprised already. Writer Peter J. Tomasi seems to be implying, just from the narrative, that Lor-Zod's not particularly bright. He's not too smart. I thought it was surprising that Lor-Zod, Sin-Sun has stolen Lor-Zod's crystalline ship, and changes the programming so that the ship only responds to the voice of Sin-Sun and doesn't respond to the voice of Lor-Zod. Well, Lor-Zod, it doesn't really seem to occur to him, that he gets angry that the ship won't respond to his voice commands. Doesn't he know how to change the algorithm at super speed on the programming, and then take out Sin-Sun? I thought that he'd have been able to do that. Now that's a minor little nitpick, and the reason why I'm going to call it minor, because I could, if this wasn't such a bloody funny and entertaining comic, I would have called that more of a major criticism. But I enjoyed the hell out of this. I enjoyed the way they beat the crap out of each other, their verbal dalliances back and forth, the way they're insulting each other back and forth. I thought it was really good, and I actually thought it was hilarious when they're swallowed by this, I don't know what the hell it is, a giant space whale. And they're in this stupid space whale or whatever, and the look on their faces. I got to tell you, this, for the first time, David LaFuente's art, I enjoyed his art more in this issue, particularly where, really for their facial expressions, because I was hoping really more, because I was predisposed to wanting a more traditional style of Super Sons art that we got with John Kent and Damian Wayne. But this was actually, it contributed to the humor, the artistic style, and it just goes to show how David LaFuente's art has grown on me. And it worked, and I thought it was a lot of fun, and there were some laugh out loud moments for me, where particularly Lor-Zod being frustrated as hell. And I will say that there is, Peter J. Tomasi very wisely had it that Lor-Zod loses his powers at some point when they're inside the belly of this space beast. Because when Lor-Zod loses his temper at one point and just attacks Sin-Sun, and if he still had his powers, I mean, the verisimilitude would suggest that he would just be able to literally rip the limbs away from Sin-Sun and just disembowel him immediately. But we have thankfully, Peter J. Tomasi was, at least in that respect, he knew that he had to depower Lor-Zod, and that's what he does here, and it works. And I still say Lor-Zod probably is a little bit not as intelligent as I would have thought he was. He doesn't even he's not as familiar with his ship as Sin-Sun seems to be. But then Sin-Sun has been established as being very good at building things. We got those in the backups to Green Lantern. So we know Sin-Sun is probably more mechanically inclined and maybe more intelligent in regard to computer and space and spaceship electronics, or whatever you want to call it, computer tech, AI, than maybe Lor-Zod is. Lor-Zod clearly is a character that Peter J. Tomasi is scripting to be too reliant on his powers. That was even suggested in the first issue of Kneel Before Zod. Lor-Zod probably is overconfident. He relies too much on his powers. Sin-Sun has to think on his feet, and he's probably more of a thinker than Lor-Zod is. So already we're seeing a dichotomy of characterizations between Sin-Sun and Lor-Zod that I like, and it's funny, and it made me laugh. This is by far my favorite issue so far, and even though it's only the second issue, it feels like we've gotten a lot of this already. A final comment I'll make is I feel that there's a very there's this decided difference in tone between this Sinister Sons series and the Kneel Before Zod series, which is very tragic with the death of his mother Ursa, and it's going to be very interesting to see how those two divergent tones in those series, how they're going to converge, because inevitably Lord Zod's going to discover that his mother was killed, and it's going to be interesting to see how Peter J. Tomasi handles that characterization here, and how Sinsen will react, and how their relationship is going to impact how Lorzad deals with the loss of his parents and being ostracized and dysfunctionally pushed away by his own father. So again, I got to say I'm enjoying it. I'm General Zod issue 3 was my pick of the week last week. And Sinister Sons here, number 2, it's a candidate for pick of the week. I haven't decided yet, but it's a candidate for pick of the week this week. So all things Zod are working out pretty good here. What do you think of this issue?
The thing that kept striking me, right? Like, you cannot help but draw parallels between Super Sons and Sinister Sons. I mean, that's how DC's marketing it, right? Like, it's the same writer, even Peter J. Tomasi, getting the kind of the next generation of heroes. Before it was Damian and John Kent. Now we have Sin Sun and Lars Zod. So what a great contrasting series, right? Damian's attitude, his petulance, that's the word I'm looking for. His petulance aside, and causes a little friction between him and John Kent at times. But for the most part, they respect each other, they care about each other, they get along, what have you. I expect at some point Sin Sun and Lars Zod are going to work together, but I don't know that they're ever going to. There's not going to be that camaraderie, right? Like, that's the sense you get. There's too much ego. There's too much of their fathers in them for that to happen. I mean, could you ever imagine Sinestro and General Zod working together? Like, they would never trust each other, and each of them would be like, you're working for me. Oh no, I'm working with you. No, you're working for me. Right? You go back and forth. They would never, agree that, you're the one in charge, you're making a decision, whatever. It would just be constant friction. You can see that it's going to be that way between their sons, and I'm here for it. Yes, the David LaFuente art does. And there was another artist as well. I don't want to sell the other artist short. I can't remember who it was now. But yeah, it is maybe not the Vasco Grega. That's who it is. It's maybe not the most dynamic art in terms of, fine lines and bombastic and over the top. But what it does is it is very welcoming. You would say with these younger characters, perhaps you might attract a younger reader. And so I think this art would, suits that or what have you. The other thing that I couldn't help but be reminded of, other than Super Sons in this particular story, is Empire Strikes Back, right? Millennium Falcon flies into the space worm. Yeah. They're inside, they're trapped. Same thing's happening here, and how these guys are going to escape, we'll have to wait and see. Who this character is that shows up on the end, at the end, that, is talking to them about being, we're not, at least we didn't fall all the way down to the stomach. At least we're not, down in the stomach being digested. And this, this other character going, well, you're not down there yet. So who he is and what he might teach the Sinister Sons and what have you remains to be seen. Really sort of cool character design on him as well. So I'm really enjoying this. It's fun. It's one of those books you don't have to think a lot. And as much as I love comics that make me think, sometimes you want something that's just, everything's there on the surface, right? And that's how it is with these two characters. They're not fully fleshed out characters because they themselves are not mature. They're young. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to wear their emotions on their sleeve. I do agree that, and it wasn't just here. I think DC actually did a good job. I'll give them some credit of making Lars Zod feel a little younger, a little less intelligent over the last, say, year and a half of stories, probably in anticipation of this. Because you're right. Like, how else are you going to have a story like this, Sinister Sons, where you're teaming up Lars Zod, who's got, the powers of a Kryptonian, the powers of Superman, and you've got Sin Sun, who technically has no powers at all. I mean, yes, very mechanically inclined. Yes, ability to, build weapons and what have you. He's even built himself some sort of force ring or what have you. But how do you put him on equal footing with Larzad? Like, you're not going to be able to, unless Larzad is a little less intelligent, unless he's just a little more of a brawler and less of a thinker. So well balanced out there. And I do hope Sin Sun gets a better name. I got to throw that out there. He was being called Korg at first because of the color of his skin, and the guy he was working for that was sort of the head of the juvenile thieves on the planet that Sin Sun was on, was calling him Korg, short Korgar.
Yeah.
The planet is obviously from based on the color of his skin. So he's gone from Korg now to Sin Sun because he believes he's Sinestro's son, Sin Sun. I feel bad. Like, the guy needs an actual name. He needs an actual name. So anyway, enjoyable read. I do recommend it. All right. Up next, we have Red Hood, The Hill, #2, Heavy is the Head. Sean Martinborough is the writer. Sanford Green is the artist. Matt Herms on colors. Troy Petrie on letters. I really didn't like the first issue of the series. I was trying to keep an open mind as I was reading the second issue. And I think what I've come to realize is I have to put aside, and I think you got it right away, Rocky. I give you all the credit. Put aside the fact that that Red Hood is in this story, and that the name of the series is Red Hood. You got to get people to pick it up. You got to get them in the door, right? He's a minor character here at most, right? But if you call it The Watch, and it's focused on the characters that Sean Martinborough is actually telling a story about, nobody's going to buy it because nobody knows who the hell The Watch is and nobody cares. You put Red Hood in it, I still don't really care, to be honest with you, but I can see, again, what Sean Martinborough's trying to do. Now, I'm not a fan of Sanford Green's art, and that's another knock again. But again, nothing against Sanford. The guy's won Eisners. He clearly can tell a story, technically very good artist, but his style is sort of it's very textured, and it's very visceral, and it's not clean, and so it's not generally what I like. The other thing, his style doesn't lend itself to any sort of primary colors or what have you. It's always going to be sort of muddy colors and feeling gritty and that sort of thing. And again, it's just not my particular cup of tea. Not the type of coloring I like, not the kind of line work I like. So, it's not going to be up my alley. Now, setting those things aside, right? Setting aside that it's characters that I don't really know, I don't have context for, and thus I can't relate to, and it's harder for me to care about them. And the fact that Red Hood is a minor character here, and I don't care for the story visually. Like, set all those aside, right? This is still a well-done comic. It's still a well-made comic. It's got the feel of a police procedural. And I think that is something that Sean Martinborough can do very, very well. He teamed up with Andy Diggle on the Thief of Thieves series over at Skybound that Robert Kirkman did. It's one of my favorite series of all time. Now, one of the differences being that Martinborough was doing the art there, and he does have a very clean, sort of simplistic style of art. Uses a little bit of a thicker line than I generally like, but his artwork works really, really well. And I wish that he had the time, in addition to writing this, to also be drawing it, because I think it would be done really, really well. That being said, all the kind of the classic ideas, the interesting political behind the scenes for motivations of characters, it's all here, corrupt politicians and neighborhoods trying to police themselves, and small business owners taking an interest, and people taking the law into their own hands, like all those sort of classic ideas from a good crime procedural are all here. And for that reason, this works. And I think that in the end, if they continue to tell a good story, I might end up calling this a success. I may, despite all those things about it that just aren't my personal preference, I think this might actually end up working. I'm actually hopeful. I'm much more hopeful after the second issue than I was the first. I just kind of had to set aside what I wanted it to be. Basically, you say it all the time, Rocky. Let me judge it for the story it is rather than the story that I want it to be. And so far, this hasn't been a Red Hood story. Now, it might be that we're just not getting a lot of Red Hood here in the beginning, because, like I said, we don't know the other characters of the Watch and of the Hill neighborhood that well yet. So Martinborough's kind of front loading and focusing on them to give us a chance to get to know them and relate to them and care about them, and we'll get more Red Hood later, I hope. But again, I think if those things happen and Martin Burrow and Sanford Green nail the landing, this could end up being a pretty good series. So we'll have to wait and see. What are your thoughts on issue 2 here?
Yeah. Well, just to you basically said it. You reiterated a lot of my thoughts and repeated them from last issue. This is a good story. This is ultimately, you said it's an origin issue for the Watch, and it happens to star Red Hood. And part of the origin, it takes place during Joker War. Only in a different part of Gotham. And this really is sort of like focusing on the different culture. I mean, really, it's the black neighborhoods of the hill portion of Gotham City. And you got the Watch consisting of Dana, who is one of the crime fighters. Her sister Denise is a reporter. There's Sophia and Edge, and they're all trained by this Miss Anisha. She's sort of like an older black ninja woman who's training them. The villain is this Demetrius Carley Jr., and he's kind of a sympathetic villain. He's even though he's a bad guy, you can tell he comes across a little bit sometimes like an anti-hero. He's sort of a badass, but he's opening up a chain of stores. So he's riding a line between being legitimate, but also delving into being kind of a crime lord. And he sells, different running shoes and what have you. And he does what he can to manipulate his friends. Good night. And to manipulate his enemies, and there's this Grand Imperial. So the Grand Imperial are a group of villains who I think are controlled by Demetrius Corley Jr., who is, I think, the central wannabe mobster. But then the Watch comes into play, and then interestingly enough, Jason Todd comes in, and he's actually sleeping with on the side. He's sleeping with Dana. So Jason Todd is coming in, and Jason Todd really does feel like an outsider here. He really does feel like an outsider. He feels out of place in this story to me in a number of ways, because it's just, mind you, I don't know how I can justify Jason Todd in this story other than the fact that editorially you can, because, well, you got to somehow link this to the Bat family, and that's what it's doing. But like you said, this is a good story, but it's sort of like when you're watching your favorite TV show, and then there's a side show that branches from it, and it's only like loosely related. It's like watching it if they did it's not a Batman TV series, but it's Gotham Central. Well, it's really just a detective show. They're just calling it Gotham Central. It's like, it's not really Batman. And that's kind of what this series is. But like you said, it's still well written. It's well paced. And it should be noted that this is, in many ways, I suspect that at the end of this, Martin Burrow he's doing a good enough job here that this story it makes a lot of sense, that there's a great characterization. There's a lot going on here. Even the members of the Watch, two of them are husband and wife. They want to sort of, they don't want to do, they know they have an unsafe job. They don't necessarily want to be heroes. They're reluctant heroes. They just want to protect their neighborhood. This is a crime fighting group of friends that this isn't the Bat family. They don't operate out of a cave. They don't got billions of dollars. And Jason Todd is really just a friend of theirs. And Jason Todd, I mean, of all the members of the Bat family to have on your side, he's probably the ultimate wild card. He's not exactly like, it's not like he's funding them or anything. They're doing their best, but I mean, they're up against really in many ways insurmountable odds, because they're up against mobsters that have got all this access to cash and power and everything else. And so if you look at the power dynamics and what's at play, there's a lot at stake. And the reality is that the storytelling here is good, but unfortunately, here's the irony: as good as this story is, and you said it, people are going to look at this and say, Joker War, that's over. And but if you focus on the story, it's actually a good story. But, it's a Red Hood. It's not really a Red Hood story. It's a false advertisement on the title, but I still want people to pick it up because it's worth reading. It's actually pretty good. And I think the art, I don't mind the art. And it's a little stylistic, but it works. It works. Great characterization. I agree the color work is a little bit off for me, but I mean, honestly, it's good enough that I'm enjoying the story. So again, I can't say this is a bad story. At least I understand what's going on. I can read it from one thing to the next. Good characterization. So this does get a recommend for me.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, up next we have Outsiders issue number 5, Nocturne. Jackson Lanzing and Colin Kelly on the script, Robert Carey on art, Valentina Tadeo on colors, Tom Napolitano on letters. What are your thoughts on this one?
Oh boy. Okay, I actually this was, man, I'm having a hard time trying to get a handle on this series. I don't exactly know what Lansing and Kelly are trying to go for with this series, but each issue, the Outsiders consist of Batwoman and Batwing, and this drummer character, and they have a carrier that can transport themselves anywhere interdimensionally across the universe and the multiverse, arguably through the bleed, and yet every issue we get something very, very different. Last issue we met Jenny Crisis, who was born as the spirit of the 21st century, and when she has a bad mood, the world has a bad mood. When she's in a good mood, the world is happy. When she's bad, and then in the issue before that, we had I think it was in the second issue, we had the Challenges of the Unknown show up. And then we got suggestions here of all kinds of things happening, but none of it's there's nothing tying this together. We got Batwing meeting a bunch of different Batmen in a different Batverse of some kind at one issue. It was all kind of interesting, but convoluted and all over the place. And here in this issue, we have the drummer drags Batwoman and Batwing to this vampire house where Nocturna is where all these predators, all these monsters are having a party, and Nocturna is a vampire character who at one point she did have an adventure. She was the villain of Batwoman in Batwoman series, where she actually ended up sleeping with Batwoman and manipulating her and turning Batwoman into a vampire, et cetera, et cetera. All of which is besides the point. Nocturna wants to introduce Batwoman to her son. She's got a son who she calls the End, and he's the Dark Messiah, and he's going to hearken in the end, and he's going to spread the truth. And Nocturna wants to show Batwoman her son. Why does Nocturna want to show Batwoman her son? Because she says, you consider yourself an archaeologist, and because they're archaeologists of the unknown. How did Nocturna know they're archaeologists of the unknown? That's never explained, but that's besides the point. Archaeologists are about discovering the truth. And my son, the Dark Messiah, he's the truth. He's the truth that you need. Okay, so why? Okay? So he's the Dark Messiah. So what? Well, then we have out of the blue we have Luke Fox ends up, each one of all the monsters in this party in this strange place. You can consent. It's called consensual predation. If killings can occur in this party, but you've got to consent to harm be inflicted upon you. So it's sort of like going to a really, really dangerous S&M party where everything's by consent. So you can do horrible things to people, and they can do horrible things to you if there's mutual consent. So that's what this is, and Luke Fox wants to protect. He sees in some of the rooms children that are, he sees one child being attacked, and he wants to help the child. And then he rescues the child, only the child ends up being a demon who I think is Clarion the Witch Boy, at the end. And Clarion the Witch Boy tells Luke Fox that, hey, I saved you. I got you out of there. You shouldn't be in there. That place is not for you. Now, what exactly is that place? We don't know. Is it in Gotham City? I don't know. Is it in another part of the universe? I don't know. It's never said exactly what the place is. I'm assuming it's someplace on Earth, but I don't really know what it is. But the most interesting part of this story, at least we are told, is why they're in this monster party run by Nocturna in the first place. Drummer is there, and Drummer is looking for information. She wants to find a place called the place in between. And so the drummer ends up talking to a whole bunch of people, including the Upside Down Man, who we last saw. Remember him from the dark JLA? Justice League Dark, right? And it's an interesting conversation that the drummer has with this extra fictional entity who is the last survivor of 196,833 very specific somethings, whatever that means. And she basically says, you know, she wants to know where the in between place is, and he says, well, I'll tell you, but you got to give me something in return. And she tells him that, well, if you tell me where the place in between is, I will murder someone in your name. And he just loves that. Now you got to do everything by consent, and so he's not thinking, so he agrees to that. And the moment he agrees to it, he tells her where the place is, and then she turns the tables on him and said, you know, basically telling him, you're an idiot. You just consented to me killing you because the person I'm going to murder in your name is you. And she ends up killing this guy. And okay, that was maybe a real cool moment. It was violent. But so we end up meeting a demon baby called the End. Why? What for? The Dark Messiah? Okay. We end up meeting this extra fictional entity who gets killed, and we end up finding the drummer finds out where the in-between place is, okay? And Batwing ends up being saved by Clarion the Witch Boy. And what does all this mean? I don't know. So they have all this information. Now combine this, they know where this in-between, the in-between place is. They know where Jenny Crisis is, who's the spirit of the 21st century. They know where all these mysterious Batman are, and there's an image of Luke Fox looking at one of the images of the Batman. I believe the Luke Fox, or he looked at the Duke version of Batman that he saw in an earlier issue from a different multi-universe. How are all these pieces linked? How is that linked to the world where they rescued that creature, where they met the challenges of the unknown? I don't know. None of these... I love the concept of planetary, but at least when I read the planetary, there was always there was a linkage. There were individual stories that were tethered together, and you could see the lines that sort of held the stories together, leading to something larger. I don't even see the strands that connect these first 5 issues together, and I got a lot of headcanon when it comes to being imaginative in the DC universe, but obviously not enough imagination. So I'm frustrated. This is kind of a cool story. It has cool moments. Now, having said that, I know I'm long-winded here, but just bear with me. Number 1, I don't like the art. And number 2, this has got to be the letterers. This is the worst lettering I've seen in a comic book in a long time. The worst lettering. I don't know. The letterer is... Tom Napolitano. I mean, the lettering on here, it's large font in one word bubble. A few word bubbles later, it's smaller, and then it's dark, and then some of it's blotted out. And sometimes when you show a swear word, he blots it out, and other times he doesn't, and it's all over the place. It's messy. There are times where the scenes are... I don't like the art because when Nocturna is talking to Batwoman on one page, whenever Batwoman's talking to her, her word bubbles are just black ink on white background on a white word bubble. And then on the next page, because Nocturna's talking and she's got a black voice, her black background is white. But they're in the same. The background should be the same. They're right beside each other, but they're doing that. It's a weird intersection between the letterer and the art not syncing up very well. I don't like it. The Upside Down Man does not look like the Upside Down Man. I guessed it was Upside Down Man, but it's a very poor rendition. Artistically, it's not very well done in my mind. I think the art fails on this. I think the entire creative team here has had a misstep, from the writing to the art to the letterer. It's a trifecta fail. Strike 1, 2, 3, you're out on this issue. But yet, I'm venting, but at the same time, having bitched and ranted like I did, I have to say that I kind of was intrigued by the story, and goddamn if I'm not a little bit interested as to where the hell this is going, because I know Lanzing and Kelly, they're not bad writers. I don't hate their writing. I don't. I still remember their Clayface story as one of the best of the One Bad Day. I really enjoyed it, and I don't mind their Batman Beyond that we reviewed. So I know they have an end game here. I just wish it was more obvious to me. But I don't know. What do you think?
Best issue of the series so far, bar none. Love the art. Love the different voices. The lettering I thought was cool. I noticed the curse words being struck out as well, which I kind of like. I kind of like it's a redacted sensibility, right? Like if you were to see a top secret report and all the stuff you couldn't read, there's a big black marker through it, rather than giving me like $, ampersand, star, at symbol, that sort of thing. Like I'd rather have it struck through like that. So like it sounds like everything you disliked about it, I liked about it. So first of all, I'm predisposed to like the story because I love Nocturna, and I say that, and I'm talking classic Nocturna, like pre-Crisis Nocturna, one of my favorite Batman villains. I don't know why I like her so much. I thought she was ill-used in Batwoman. It technically a different character with a different name and everything, but clearly drew inspiration from the original Nocturna. So to have her show up here, and this characterization of her, this iteration of her, is a little closer to what she was originally. This idea of her loving luxury, and the only reason that she has sort of a life of crime is because she loves luxury and she wants the finer things in life or what have you. And then, post New 52, they turned her into a vampire, but there's still a little bit of that sensibility of what she wants out of life and what have you. And so, again, I think this is closer to her original iteration than it has been before. This whole idea of this baby, vampires who are not supposed to be able to reproduce, the fact she was able to have a child, and it's not a vampire. She goes, oh, it's human as you call it a demon baby. According to her, it's not. It's more like a human, maybe going to have some powers later. Like you can't help but think of the Antichrist. And so that naturally led me to Baby Teeth, which was an Aftershock series by Donny Cates. Very similar, a baby's born and is going to be bring around the end of mankind or what have you. The fact that the baby's called The End, like that, I just loved it.
That was interesting. That was cool. Yeah.
I thought, the color, everything's dark. They're in this bar. Yes, we don't know exactly where it is, but I was kind of okay with that. The Outsiders as a team, they've been globetrotting all over the place. And I like that feel as well. Like no place is too far, no corner too far. They can travel anywhere quickly. And it really sells the sense of them being kind of a global organization. The other thing that I think is really starting to allow this series to work for me is this idea of like an X-Files type episodic show. Like each issue, what I appreciate about the series, each issue, you can read it on your own. It stands alone. You don't have to, go back. I mean, yeah, you're probably going to want to read the first one because it kind of explains, Luke Fox gets a little expositional and explains the concept of the Outsiders and what they're up to and that sort of thing. So, but other than that, you can kind of read them on their own, and they're just out there dealing with weirdness, right? Not so unlike Blue Beetle back in the day, which was kind of similar to this, but in a much more fun, lighthearted way, where Dan Cassidy, that jokingly would call him the weirdness magnet because he's constantly having all these weird monsters and situations show up and affect him. And I'll just as an aside, Paris Cullins is going to be at Phoenix Fan Fusion this year. I live in Phoenix, and he's the one that was co-creator of Blue Devil. I can't wait I've never met him. Fantastic artist back in the day. I mention him on the Blue Beetle stuff all the time because he's my favorite Blue Beetle artist. But anyway, if you can make it out, highly recommend it. Make sure you bring your Blue Devil comics. But anyway, I do enjoy that this is just weird and out there, and each issue feels like an episode of the X-Files. And yeah, there's a through line. There's a bigger kind of overarching plot that we don't have much clue or much context for yet. Some hints here, as you mentioned, with Drummer looking for the place in between. But I know we'll get there, and I trust Jackson Lanzing. I trust Colin Kelly. They're talented writers, as you mentioned. So I think this can work. I don't have the no pun intended. I don't have the authority. Background or context to compare this the way that you do, so it doesn't that part doesn't bother me. I'm just enjoying this for what it is, And I get that part of the reason I love this issue so much was because Nocturna's in it, but I just thought I love the art. Yeah, you can get a little nitpicky about Upside Down Man not looking like he's looked before or what have you, but you mentioned the moment where Drummer, she makes this deal, she tricks this demon. Yeah, I'll murder someone in your name. Hey, guess what? The person I'm going to murder is you. You're a demon. I'm going to cut your head off. No great loss or what have you. Like, what a badass moment. Like, Drummer, I love Luke Fox and I love Kate Kane. Kate Kane I like Batwoman more than I like Batman, to be honest. But I think Drummer might actually be my favorite character because she takes no shit, right? She just does what she does, and she's been a fantastic character throughout. So, yeah, it seems like all the things that you didn't like about it, I loved. I love the art. I love the lettering. I love the mystery of it. I love the one and done feel. But I can see what you're coming from. Like, this is what, issue number 5. We're 5 issues in, and we still don't know the big thing yet. It's been these sort of one and done issues. But again, I think it's my trust in these writers that I know they're going to make it all make sense in the end. That'll make it work. I mean, it's not so different from what Ram V did in, what was the name?
The Vigil.
The Vigil, right? The Vigil. Thank you. How each of those was sort of a standalone, and then the penultimate issue, he all tied in. We found out what was behind all of their abilities and what was going on behind the scenes, and it brought all those issues together. That was issue 5 of a 6-issue series that brought it all together. So I get it. This is issue 5 of who knows how many issues. But yeah, I feel like we just haven't gotten the answers yet of what the big thing is. But maybe we get that in issue 6 because that would be the final issue of the first trade. So we'll have to wait and see. But man, I love this. Made me like reading this. Made me want to go back and read my old Detective Comics and Batman stories from like 1986 with Nocturna.
Well, here's a theory. Here's a theory for you. Wouldn't it be interesting if this series, which I'll be blunt, I don't think a lot of people are buying. I think they probably should be because I think, like I said, I was frustrated with this issue, but there's absolutely something going on that I'm interested. Something is absolutely going on, and they're archaeologists of the unknown, and something is going on in the universe. We know that in September, DC is going to be maybe revamping or doing something in the DC universe. Is this a series that's going to go under the radar? Is something major going to happen in the pages of Outsiders that is going to be significant in the broader context of the DCU? Who knows? I mean, would DC do that? I mean, they probably shouldn't, but will they? So I'm always thinking that in the back of my head. Maybe what Lanzing and Kelling are building to might actually, in Outsiders, might actually have some ramifications in the larger DCU. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, again, not much context here, but it is selling better than Speed Force, which again, that's not
really?
Yeah, and it's selling better than Fables, but again, Fables is sort of neat. So I don't know that really says a lot. It's selling more than those two titles. So yeah, I actually don't know what sales. I not only do I not know exact sales numbers at DC anymore, I don't even know who at DC knows exact sales numbers anymore. I used to be able to go to the PR guys and they could tell me, but they don't even know anymore. So yeah, it's all a convoluted mess these days when it comes to that.
Yeah.
All right. Up next, really curious to hear your thoughts on this one. Batman Dylan Dog, #1, The Shadow of the Bat. Story by Roberto Recchioni, who is an Italian. And when I say Italian, the guy lives in Italy. I don't even know if he speaks English. But he handles the story. Gigi Cavanago, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, and Werther Del Edra do the art. Gigi Cavanago handles the colors on the prologue. Giovanni Nero handles the colors for the rest. And then Pat Brosso is the letterer. So if you don't know who Dylan Dog is, don't worry. I'm going to tell you. So I remember seeing this, a while back in pre-orders or what have you, and I never really looked at it or paid that much attention. I probably got a press release about it that I must have skipped somehow and didn't read. I thought I'm like, okay, Batman and Dylan Dog. What is this like? Ace the Bat Hound? Batman's getting a new dog. Is like teaming up, whatever. Like I had no idea. And then I get in there to the first couple pages and I'm flipping through and it's some guy named Dylan Dog. I'm like, what? Am I supposed to know who this is? So I had to go and Google it. So Dylan Dog is a long running, I mean, decades, like 40 years. He has had a comic in Italy, and it's the second best selling comic in Italy, month in and month out. Uh, and so, just because if you're like me, you're like, well, what's the best selling comic, Jace? The best selling comic's called Tex, and it's a Western. It's about a guy, it's set in the American Old West. It's set in the American Old West, 1880s, whatever, and the guy's name is Tex. And he's out there having adventures, think Gunsmoke or Marshall Dillon, that sort of thing. So that's the best selling comic in Italy. Safe to say, spaghetti western and the romanticization of the American West is alive and well in Italy. But the second best comic, month in, month out, is this Dylan Dog character, who is sort of an investigator of the supernatural, the paranormal, if you will. Kind of goes out and will disprove, ghosts and zombies and all that, but also does encounter like true supernatural things, whatever. So that's who Dylan Dog is. I had no idea. So the whole idea of the story is there's the main antagonist, the guy that Dylan Dog goes up against all the time. This Dr. Zabraxis, I think is his name. He was one of the first doctors that the Joker went to after being injured, and was one that helped him sort of heal his face. And he reaches out to the Joker and says, hey, why don't you come over to Europe or what have you? So the Joker, along with Killer Croc, hey, yeah, let's get out from under Batman's eye and go to London, and we'll see what this Dr. Zabraxis would like, why he's calling me over here, what have you. And he's suffered some defeats at the hands of Dylan Dog recently, and so he kind of wants some help taking out Dylan Dog. So Batman, of course, follows Joker and Killer Croc over to London, ends up teaming up with Dylan Dog, and this is very broad strokes. So you've got the main antagonist of Batman and the main antagonist of Dylan Dog teaming up, and then you have the two heroes teaming up as well, reluctantly, because Batman doesn't trust Dylan Dog doesn't trust Batman. Neither one of them really approves of the other's methods. And oh, by the way, when Batman arrives in London, guess who is hanging out with Dylan Dog? And when I say hanging out, like the whole 9 yards, being intimate, that sort of thing, but Catwoman, Selena Kyle. So I actually enjoyed this. I thought, I got into open it up. I'm like, oh, so it's not Batman teaming up with a dog? Okay. I was a little disappointed initially. I like dogs. And I was like, okay, let me look. I looked at the page count. It's something like 80 pages. Oh, so it's a one and done, right? No, it's not a one and done. This is only the first part of the story. I don't know how many issues. But it goes to show how different things are in other countries when they're telling stories, right? This is like an 80 pager. That's typical of an Italian comic. They don't come out as often. They don't come out every month. They come out like once every 3 months. So you get, a bigger chunk of story. So although I'm not familiar with Dylan Dog, and although, the art is more of a watercolor style, which is not typically art that I enjoy, I thought this worked really well. I liked the character of Dylan Dog. I thought he was interesting. Obviously, I still don't know that much about him, but ultimately, I thought this was pretty solid. It was a good start to a story. I don't know if it's going to be coming out monthly because, again, it looks like they're trying to take almost like the European model of comics. So we'll have to wait and see how many issues it goes. There's been 3 issues solicited so far. So, but I don't know. Does that mean it's only 3 issues, or it's just because they haven't solicited the future issues yet? Because we only go 2 months in advance. I don't know. Anyway, were you familiar with Dylan Dog? Did you know that it was an actual guy and not a dog?
Yeah, I was. It was familiar to me, but not as an Italian comic. I Googled it, and then how I remembered it was Brandon Routh did a movie in 2011. Brandon Routh, who we think of as Superman Returns, he played Dylan Dog in the movie Dylan Dog Dead of Night, and I remember that movie.
I've never heard of that movie. I'm going to look it up right.
Yeah, I have no idea that it was based on this very popular Italian comic book, which back in 2000, when I googled the numbers, there 100 back in 2014, Dylan Dog sells 120,000 comics monthly in Italy, and Dark Horse published some Dylan Dog in 1999, 2002, and 2009. He's sold 60 million copies worldwide, Dylan Dog, and I mean, wow,
They, yeah, they
it's
Americanized
impressive
him
stuff.
and put him in New Orleans.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I might even, who knows, I might even have some old back in my some of my boxes, comic boxes. I might even have some old Dark Horse Dylan Dog comics. But in any event, straight up though, I have to say that reading this, I thought this was hilarious because this Dylan Dog character, what I loved about this characterization is I loved how, and it's this, and I got to credit the writer, Roberto Resciani. I mean, I love the way he characterizes Dylan Dog, and even how he writes Batman. Batman and Dylan Dog don't really like each other. Batman is only going to London because he's trying to find the Joker, and of course their respective villains, Doctor Exabarus, Ezarap, Xabaras. Dr. X, I'll call him, whatever, and the Joker, they have a history, and the way that their histories are linked, I thought was very ingenious, that Dr. X there helped the Joker. I thought it was really well done. I particularly liked the dynamic between Dylan Dog and Groucho, which is his sidekick. It was very different than the relationship between Bruce Wayne and Alfred. Groucho is genuinely funny. There's some laugh out loud moments here. In fact, there's one scene where the Joker, Groucho is being basically he after the Joker injects Selina Kyle with Catwoman with some poison, he's about to do the same with Groucho, and Groucho makes a series of comments, and he at one point Joker drops the needle, and Groucho says, that's one thing you've lost that I hope you never find. And he's cracking just little innuendo jokes like that, and the Joker even comments to him that, in a different life, you and I could have been friends, because anyways, I thought it worked very well. And the relationship between Groucho and Dylan Dog is like a poor man's Bruce Wayne. Because he's broke. It's established that Dylan Dog is broke. He's got no money. He even refuses Bruce Wayne's money because he doesn't like Bruce Wayne when he shows up on his doorstep looking for and who's in there. I mean, Bruce Wayne shows up. He not only doesn't like he doesn't like Dylan to begin with because of all his research, but then when he shows up and he sees that Selina Kyle is sleeping with Dylan, I mean, he doesn't like him for that reason. And I sort of like that. In all the ways, Dylan Dog is almost like a cross between a poor Batman and a John Constantine, really, except he's a little bit more likable, Dylan Dog. I like, and he doesn't have Constantine's accent. He doesn't smoke. And I find him a little bit more, I just find him a little bit more charismatic than even John Constantine, but maybe because I'm a little bit biased. I also like his black overcoat, his red trench. Apparently that's his classic look when I Googled the character. So I actually really liked it. Killer Croc ends up being in this comic. I love how even there's a commissioner. He's got a good relationship with Commissioner Block. So Dylan Dog has a good relationship with Commissioner Block. Commissioner Block's heard of Commissioner Gordon. At one time, Dylan Dog, he wants to get a hold of Batman. So he has Commissioner Block do a makeshift bat signal in downtown London in order to attract Batman. There's a lot going on here in 80 pages, and all the while, the goal there is to stop the Joker, and the Batman doesn't trust Dylan. Dylan doesn't trust him, and but they both like sleeping with Catwoman. So I mean, it's an adult story. The art's fantastic. I love how Catwoman ends up battling Killer Croc. Catwoman ends up ultimately being, she ends up being taken by Killer Croc and Joker, and Dylan and Groucho ends up being taken too. Lots of moving parts, but lots of pages. I found myself glued. When I read this, I just flowed. I enjoyed it. I went from page to page, and No, I can understand why the Italians love this Dylan character because he's very interesting. He's a smartass. He's sort of a woman's man. He's creative. He's not rich, but yet somehow he seems to show a lot of agency in his own right. He's got sort of a doofus sort of sidekick Groucho, but who's funny, so it's comic relief. But this Groucho is also intelligent and reasonably competent, much like Alfred, but just with a different set of characteristics. So, yeah, Dylan Dog. Who knew? This character. I mean, good for those Italians. I'll have to. It's nice to know that they're good for more than just pizza.
Yeah, did you ever see that movie with Brandon Routh?
Did I watch the movie?
Yeah.
I did watch it. I can't remember most of it, but I googled a couple scenes on my iPhone. But
yeah, I never heard. I don't know how I missed it, but yeah, so interesting. I agree with you that yeah, he's an interesting character, a lot of fun, and yeah, we'll see where the series goes. It is monthly. I just looked, so we're supposed to have another issue in April, followed by issue 3 in May. Still these larger format, 80 pages. So yeah, fantastic. Yeah, and also interesting. You talk about Dylan Dog as a character, and I said he's been around for a long, long time. You mentioned his sidekick Groucho. I'm glad you brought him up because I should have mentioned him as well. He is inspired by Groucho Marx, which Dylan Dog, having appeared in I think his first appearance is like mid '80s, so he's been around like 30 years or so, almost 40 years. At that point, it had been like 30 years since Groucho Marx was anybody. So I do find it interesting that the creator at the time, because the guy that created him, I think, is like in his 70s. So he would have been, late 20s, early 30s in 1980, mid 80s when Dylan Dog was created. So he wasn't exactly the generation that would buy into Groucho Marx. But again, Italy. So sometimes things that are popular here take a while to become popular over there. So I don't know. Maybe he grew up watching Groucho Marx reruns or what have you in the 70s. Who knows? But yeah, interesting that you say it's not just that his name is Groucho. Like he looks like Groucho Marx with the mustache and the glasses and haircut and that sort of thing. So anyway, up next we have Wesley Dodds, the Sandman. This is the finale, issue 6. Written by Robert Vendetti, art by Riley Rosmo, colors by Ivan Placencia, letters by Tom Napolitano. We've been big fans of this series throughout. We get a satisfying conclusion here. What I love about it, it's not the cliched sort of ending of the story that you might expect. It's not like Wesley Dodds goes in there and saves the day with no consequences, whatever. He barely survives the encounter with Vanderlyle, who he saw as sort of a second father figure. So this guy had been a soldier in World War I, along with Wesley Dodds' father. Wesley Dodds' father was killed in the war, and so there's a lot of personal investment from both Vanderlyle and Wesley Dodds here. Wesley Dodds wants to stop the killing. He wants to stop war. And that's the whole idea behind his sleeping gas. As opposed to Vanderlyle, who dealt with the horrors of war and is like, if all that matters is victory, it doesn't matter how many people die as long as those people are on the other side. So let's come up with, even better weapons and what have you. So you can, it's a little bit harder to relate to Vanderlyle, but at least you can see his point. You can understand his motivations. But again, what I appreciated about the ending here was Wesley Dodds doesn't escape unscathed. He gets he's cut several times with a knife. He gets stabbed. He barely survives it. And the only reason he does survive it is because although he's able to grab his book of formulas from Vanderlyle and destroy it by throwing it into a fire, Vanderlyle then grabs the fire poker and almost beats him to death with it. And the only reason that Wesley Dodds isn't killed is because he gets shot by, not Wesley Dodds, but Vanderlyle gets shot by Deanne, Wesley's girlfriend, who shows up in the nick of time. So, again, it's not like this cliched thing where, Wesley Dodds swooped in and saved the day. This was a messy story in a lot of ways for Dodds, kind of learning about he's a pacifist, or aspires to be a pacifist, and he's learning about kind of the seedy underbelly of the world. Basically, these are hard times that are coming up, and so he's not able to stay as clean as he would like. So again, hard lessons to learn. And then at the end we have, because he becomes a member of the Justice Society, we have the prerequisite splash page at the end by Riley Rosmo, where the rest of the Justice League members show up to recruit him to be part of the Justice Society at the end. So I did appreciate that. And again, I've said this before, I appreciate how much Robert Vendetti does research on these characters and gives his take. He's a comic book fan through and through, his favorite character being Superman. So if we were to get a Justice Society book, now that we know that the one that Jeff Johns is doing, if we were to get another one, I would argue it might not be a bad idea to kind of have it set in this world, which feels a little bit, back then, as opposed to the Justice Society story we're being told now, which feels like it's supposed to be in modern times. Let's set it back then, kind of like All-Star Squadron did, and let Robert Venditti handle the art duties. I don't know if Riley Rosmo is up to the task for doing a team book, so maybe get him, maybe get somebody else. Although if you do get Riley Rosmo, I'll say this. He draws one hairy Hawkman. Hawkman in that comic is very hairy. I was like, why is he so hairy? Maybe Riley Rosmo was thinking of it, he's kind of a hawk and, they're covered with feathers. I'm going to cover this guy with hair. I don't know. It was very strange. But anyway, ultimately, I really enjoyed this series. I expected to like it because it's Robert Venditti and he's one of my favorite writers, but it exceeded all my expectations. And, Rocky and I have talked about it a lot. Riley Rosmo, his art just gets better and better. It's a stylized art, stylized style that he uses. Takes a little getting used to, but I think he did a fantastic job throughout this series. Especially, I'll say, not only has his kind of stylistic anatomy sort of calmed down a little bit over time, his storytelling, his transitions from panel to panel sequentially have really improved over time, I would say. So anyway, what were your thoughts on this finale?
Yeah, I'll just add to your comments, just talking about Riley Rosmo. Some of the pages here are just incredible. I mean, there are pages where there is very little dialogue, and you don't need any dialogue. And kudos to Robert Vendetti to let Riley Rosmo's art speak for itself and tell the story. I mean, one of my favorite pages, it's probably my second favorite page. There's so many. There's one where Vanderlyle is taking the hot poker and beating the hell out of Sandman there, and there's just cards. There's just little broken panels of red blood, and it's conveying a beating, even though it's not really conveying the beating. But you're seeing the blood, and you get a sense of the visceral violence that is taking place here. And it's, this is all about war and peace. This is all about, Sandman is all about peace and utilizing gas to put soldiers to sleep so you don't have to have violence. And Vanderlyle is all about war and destruction and blood. And just the color work with Riley Rosmo's art is just fantastic. There's the sequences here. There's one of my favorite scenes. He's so good at using smoke. He's so good at using Sandman smoke, and as when Sandman and Vanderlyle are fighting, and the green smoke is surrounding them, you can the way Riley draws in the hallucinations that Sandman is experiencing of his dead father telling him you killed the world, and what he's hallucinating. It works so well. You know what's going on, and again, there's not a lot of dialogue there because you don't need it because it's so obvious what's happening. And this is such a. It's amazing how much of a different shift this is when you get a different character like Sandman versus the Flash, where sometimes with Flash, it's hard to draw what the hell might be going on because it's like flash facts and comic book science. But this one it's much, I like one advantage of these stories that are just a little bit more down to earth and just dealing with basically smoking gas is that the artist can be as creative as Rosmo is here, and you can understand what's going on. And he's so creative on the panels and what he puts on the page that it really enhances the storytelling. And I got to tell you, a final comment on, would I be in favor of Riley Rosmo drawing a Justice Society comic book? My first instinct is I was so of mixed feelings about it, because on the final page, when I look at this rendition with the Harry Hawkman and everyone else, I don't know if I'd want Riley Rosmo to be on that team book, to be honest with you. I think he's better on a character like Sandman here, where he's able to maximize all his creative use of the layouts. And like, this wasn't just a story about peace and violence, but this is also a love story, because Sandman ends up with the love of his life at the end too, and ends up joining the team. But this is such a welcome addition. This ends welcome addition to the superhero pantheon of the DC universe, and it ends with him joining the Justice Society, which is exactly what you want. Great story, and I think this is going to hopefully sell. Hopefully it'll sell better in trades. I don't know how it's sold in floppies, but this deserves to sell well in trades, and it should, and I hope it does.
Yeah, I think it will. I think Robert's stuff typically sells well in trade, so I would expect that. All right, last book we're going to talk about in detail here. We have Suicide Squad Dream Team #1 from writer Nicole Maines. Pencils by Eddie Barrows, inks by Eber Ferreira, colors by Adriana Lucas, letters by Becca Carey. It's the Suicide Squad. It's Amanda Waller. It's Dreamer. And much like, Nicole has done her homework here. Much like many Suicide Squad stories, they're not given the whole truth when they get sent on the mission. And as soon as they go on the mission, they get to where the mission is supposed to take place, things immediately go sideways. This time in the case of Bizarro kind of going buck wild, and they're supposed to be in an undercover mission in Gamora. Also, they've discovered that, shockingly, Amanda Waller has not told them the truth about the mission they're actually in.
No.
Yeah. Again, Nicole has done her homework. I was so impressed. Like, I had to go back, and I talked to Nicole. I hope you guys all had a chance to check it out. She came on and talked about this series, talked about her work with Dreamer overall.
You bet. It was a good interview.
Yeah, it was a fantastic interview. She's so engaging and super talented. And I knew she was the only writer on this, but I was so impressed with the pacing and how well, and we talked about this when she was on here, how well she got the voices of the other characters. She talked about being really excited to be able to write Harley. I went back and I was like, she has no co-writer on this, right? I went back and looked at the credits. I was like, yeah, sure enough, she does not have a co-writer, because she just nailed it. She just nailed it. This felt like somebody who's been writing the Suicide Squad for years. I was very impressed with the story. I love that Dreamer knows that Waller is, up to no good. She's not one of these characters that has the wool pulled over their eyes, that thinks Amanda Waller is anything other than an outright villain. So I appreciated that. When it comes to this art team of Barrows, Ferreira, and Adriana Lucas, they've done many things together. Most recently, they did the Task Force Z storyline that we reviewed, the Two-Face story. Before that, they worked with Robert Vendetti, who we were just talking about, on the Freedom Fighters story. They're a dream team. They bring out the best in each other, both the color work, highlighting the line work, highlighting the inks. It all works beautifully together. Fantastic art. This was a great way to kick off. I wouldn't necessarily say it's new reader friendly. That's, if I'm looking for something to nitpick, you do need some knowledge of what the Suicide Squad is. Nicole doesn't waste any time kind of going over that. As a longtime DC reader, I appreciated that. Don't waste any story real estate going over that. I think anybody that's picking this up has probably read Suicide Squad comics before, or they've at least seen the movies. They're familiar with the concept. So yeah, don't waste any time on that. And so for that reason, again, if somebody's not familiar at all with the Suicide Squad, they might be like, wait, what's going on? But I'm searching. I'm searching hard to find anything negative to say. That's how good this book is. So I thought it was absolutely amazing. Loved every moment of it, and that's saying a lot when it's a book that has Amanda Waller in it, who, we all know I could never read a comic that she's in again for the rest of my life and be okay with never seeing her again. But I was just impressed, page after page. I thought this was fantastic. So we'll see where it all leads. But I'm feeling really good about the series after checking out the first issue. What do you think?
I want Nicole Maines to write Harley Quinn. I want her to write Harley Quinn. If the powers that be if DC's going to insist that if you're going to be putting, it seems like they want women to write female characters, that's fine. Nicole Maines, what I give her props for is, I'll be blunt, I had my doubts about her. I thought she was kind of a diversity hire. You're hiring CW writer. What are you, a CW actor? What are you, crazy? Come on. I had all the doubts, but you know what? Foot into my mouth. She has proven me wrong. She has earned it. She knows these characters. She does her research. She does the interviews. She talks like she knows these characters. And I read a story like this, and she does. There's two ways I can criticize this story, but the one is a compliment. The one is not her fault. One is editorial, and it has to do with Amanda Waller. It's not Nicole Maines' fault. Nicole Maines, she did the assignment here. She knows these characters. I'm enjoying Harley Quinn more in this story than I do in than under Teenie Howard in the main title. Also, kudos to Eddie Burrows, who draws, and with apologies to John Timms on Action Comics, but this is the best rendition of Bizarro. This is absolutely a full-page spread of Bizarro. This is absolutely terrorizing Bizarro. This is an amazing Bizarro picture. But getting back to Nicole Maines, this story here is she's writing what she knows. And what she knows is she knows about Gamora because she worked with Tom Taylor on the John Kent storyline, John Kent Superman and Son of Superman, and so she's building on that, and that's so the central part of this story is going into Gamora because Amanda Waller's assignment is she wants the Suicide Squad here to enter the dreamscape and then enter through a man's consciousness through I guess a guard who's sleeping in the Gamoran capital. They're going to enter Gamora through the consciousness of one of the guards who's sleeping. But the only way they can do that is by using Dreamer, who can access the dream realm. And apparently the Dreamer can access anywhere in the universe she can access through the dream realm. Now, there's a couple of things that are wonky here story-wise. But it's workable. I do find it's a little bit. They enter the dream realm, and they're surrounded by a bunch of mirrors, and I find it interesting that apparently these mirrors reflect certain aspects of what the person is dreaming, but there's got to be like millions of people in the billions of people in the universe, trillions, but somehow the Dreamer is capable of focusing her powers into a particular area of Gamora, and then they got to pick the right person and come out through the consciousness. It seems a little bit. I do find Dreamer's powers. I still find them a little bit wonky. Having said that, though, there's lots. I could say the same thing about the Flash at the moment and many other characters of the DC universe. So we really can't point fingers in that regard. But it's a nitpick. I like the Dreamer because she's a woman that wants to do well. She's in extraordinary circumstances. She's being blackmailed by Amanda Waller, and she knows she is. But she knows, as Harley Quinn says to her, sometimes you're being blackmailed. There's nothing you can do. And for once, Harley Quinn gives, Harley Quinn knows what it feels like to be totally helpless, and so Harley Quinn gives her some good advice. Like sometimes if you're in a hopeless situation, all you can do is do your job, but then look for openings to be the best. To be the best person you can in a bad situation. And that's exactly what Dreamer does. And so I like the conversations here. The dialogue is great. I particularly love some of these newer characters. There's this one character, can't remember his name. He's almost like the Sherlock Holmes, the evil version of Sherlock Holmes on the team. But I don't know what his name is. But the what?
Clock King?
Oh, yeah, Clock King. Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't remember the name, but anyways, I love his character in this. I love their I just love the dialogue. I thought it worked very well. Now at the end, so you're right. The pacing, the story-wise, I'm interested. This is a great Suicide Squad story. Where my frustration comes in has nothing to do with that. Nicole Maines knew the assignment and she's done a good job there. I'm just frustrated because I want I want I want more I want more stuff on Amanda Waller. I want her to get her comeuppance. Clearly, Amanda Waller she's just using this because she probably wants to. I mean, there's 1,000 ways to enter Gamora. You don't have to enter Gamora through the dreamscape. I think she's using the Dreamer in order to somehow take advantage of Dreamer's powers for some future machinations that she's going to use in absolute power. That's my guess. But I'm still frustrated with Amanda Waller. I still would like to know more about Amanda Waller per se, in the context of this story. And your interview with her, Nicole Maines did hint that we're going to be getting to see maybe some of the characteristics in the softer side, or at least what led Amanda Waller down this path. She hinted at that. At least that was my understanding of what she said. So I'm actually I'm really curious to see if, I hope that that's the case. Now, the art, Eddie Burrows' art is absolutely fantastic. And thank you for mentioning Task Force Z, because I was wondering why this art looks so spectacular and familiar at the same time. That's where we last saw it. It is really spectacular. She's very lucky that Eddie Burrows, because Dreamer looks more awesome as a character here because of Eddie Burrows. Because if this was in the hands of a less talented artist, it would impact the way I view Dreamer. But she looks like a mature character. She looks like even beyond her beyond her years. To me, she's even she's almost acting above her pay grade here, and I'm kind of impressed. And she's growing on me as a character. And again, I wouldn't mind if you're gonna be giving a new writer. Could Nicole Maines be could she be the female Jeremy Adams? Hey, I mean, I wouldn't maybe give her a title like Harley Quinn, or give her something else more permanent. Because I think she's up to task, because she accepts the challenge and she does a pretty good job. So yeah, I like it.
Yeah, I actually don't know if Nicole would have interest in doing that full time. I don't know if she's still trying to act or what. She definitely seems engaged, and she was excited to, like I said, do this series and write some other characters. And she specifically mentioned Harley, so she'd probably be down for that. I don't know if she'd want to do it on a monthly basis, but who knows? But yeah, I'm all for it. Give her Harley, because she does have a good take on her. And yeah, I when you talk about Eddie Barrows making Dreamer look badass, I mean that splash scene on the title page where she's tied up in the chair and Amanda's talking to her and she just looks up at Amanda and says, "Bite me." I mean, that's fantastic. That's just it really, really works. So
Yeah.
anyway, that does it for the books we're going to talk about in detail. There are a couple of other single issues out this week that we didn't mention. We have, I guess, one issue, which is Looney Tunes number 277. And then as far as collections this week, there's a couple of them. Batman Volume 1 Failsafe trade paperback. So that's collecting the beginning of the Chip Zdarsky run, issues 125 through 130 of Batman. We've got Batman Superman World's Finest Volume 3 Elementary hardcover. That's the Mark Waid run. That's collecting issues 12 through 17 of the current World's Finest run. Teen Titans Year 1 is also collected. So that was the issue or the series that had a bunch of different characters that were all focused on. So there's various writers and pencilers there. We also have Wildcats Volume 2. This is the Matthew Rosenberg written series. I liked it a lot more than Rocky did, but yeah, it was a little up and down. But that collects the final 6 issues of that, issues 7 through 12. And I think that's it. Oh, there is also a Superman, the Silver Age Omnibus Volume 1 hardcover. And that's collecting issues 241 through 265 of Action Comics and Superman issues 122 to 137. And if you were to go and look up those issues, far and away the issue that is most expensive, hardest to get your hands on of those is issue 242 of Action Comics, which is the first appearance of Brainiac. So if you're like me and you'd love to own that, but you're never going to be able to spend over $1,000 on a comic, this is a way to own it and be able to read it by picking up this omnibus. So that does it for collections. Time for Book of the Week, Rocky. You mentioned you had a few considerations. Have you narrowed it down?
I have. I narrowed it down between Green Lantern and Sinister Sons, and I would put in third place Suicide Squad Dream Team because I really was biased to not want to like that. But Nicole Maines, I mean, she did a pretty good job, and the art by Eddie Burrows just put it over the top. But I got to go with Sinister Sons is my choice, just because I just thought it was for me it was just I really enjoyed it, and so I Sinister Sons is my pick of the week. What about
Wow,
yourself?
this is the first time in a while that we haven't been kind of overlapping. I mean, you did mention your, kind of third for you is the Suicide Squad Dream Team. So that's my co-pick because I can't. There's just times when I can't narrow it down to just one. So based on my reviews, anybody's been listening, you probably guessed the two that I'm gonna pick. So yeah, Suicide Squad Dream Team definitely gets my nod. I was super impressed. I mean, it says it all. The fact that I'm halfway through, maybe 2/3 through the story, and I go double check that Nicole didn't have a veteran comic writer helping her. That's how good it was. Like that. How can I not give it my pick, right? But also, I sang the praises and loved every bit of The Outsiders. And again, all the things that you didn't like, even to the point of the lettering, I just loved. And I freely admit part of it is because I'm getting to see Nocturna, and she seems a little more like the characterization of the original Nocturna back in the day, rather than the more recent one that.
Well, I will grant you that the story is very intriguing. Something is
Yes.
happening that does intrigue me. I thought, the whole package itself didn't. I didn't think it was packaged well, but obviously we disagree on that, and that's all well and good. Hopefully, it's interesting. Vive la
Yeah.
différence.
Yeah, we'll see how it all wraps up. But yeah, I just love that story. I love Drummer as a character. That moment with the demon chops his head off, fantastic. So yeah, those are my two co-picks. I haven't done it in a long time. I know it's cheating a little bit, but you know what? This is our hill of beans, our hill, our beans. We can do what we
We
want.
can do
And
what
I'm
we
picking
want.
two. That's right. I'm picking two. So yeah, I mentioned the Nicole Maines interview. That was a while back. I hope you guys all had a chance to check out my most recent interview that I released. It's about a crowdfunding campaign that's going on right now on Indiegogo. The artist's name is Lucas Lee Garza. He's actually Jim Lee's son. Uh, don't let that fool you. I don't think Jim's helping out too much in terms of this guy wants to make it on his own. So if you're curious about Game of Thrones, World of Warcraft, fantasy, magic, stories like that, go check it out. The art is very manga influenced, very interesting. So go check out the interview. Check out the link, Indiegogo. One of the most affordable Kickstarters I've seen in a long time. Like you're getting like a handmade backpack, handmade like keychain that's carved, as well as books, including the variant covers. And it's the first three issues, and they're all, I think, like 30 pages each. So longer than a regular book. And you can get all that for $100. Like it very reasonable. If you want just a comic, it's just like $5. Well, that's the price of a regular book now. That's 20 pages, and you're getting like 28 pages. So yeah, definitely go check it out. I also recently last week, and apologies that it didn't come out the week before like I thought it would. But last week I finally got a chance to talk to Tom King and Daniel Sampere about Wonder Woman. We're supposed to do it the week before, but some stuff came up and one of the guys wasn't able to make it, so we rescheduled. But that's up. Had a fantastic conversation with them, and then the Daily Spawn continues as well over on YouTube. You guys seem to be enjoying that. So yeah, if you've found us on YouTube on Rocky's channel, be sure you subscribe, leave some comments below, ring the notification bell so you know when new content is coming out. If you're curious about Daily Spawn, you can find it on the audio only podcast feed for the Comic Source. Just go to wherever you get your podcast, whatever platform or app, do a search for the Comic Source and subscribe. If you want to actually see the visuals, just go to the Comic Source YouTube channel and you can check it out there. As well as I'm starting to put all my interviews up on YouTube now. Doing a little work on the graphics and what have you. It takes a little more time, but I think it's worth it. So what about you, Rocky? Anything else coming up? Anything you want to mention?
Not at this time. No, I've got a pretty busy week here at work, but well, we'll see. I don't like making any promises. I shoot my mouth off too much, so maybe if I don't say anything, something will happen.
Okay, well, coming up, I do have a chat with Philip Kennedy Johnson about Green Lantern War Journal that I'm looking forward to talk about the first arc and see where it goes from there. So look for that later this week, everybody. We appreciate you joining us as always. Don't forget to head over to Comic Space Boom ! On YouTube and subscribe. You're listening to audio only. We appreciate the support as always, and we'll talk to you next time.
Catch you later.